Closed session, we are now at a closed session and into agenda additions. Do we have any agenda additions?
I've got one note, it's an alteration to the agenda under other, number 8 is not a MERS election, it's a PAR plan, the insurance company election. It appears that a MERS document correspondence got attached that's not related. So it's what needs to be there is there. There's an additional note from MERS that was attached to the same email. So it is a PAR plan election.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Oh, I have something.
Yes.
Under the finance, on the table is a copy of the check disbursements from all the other checking accounts, not the common account that we set up by month for you guys to see. DDA, that type of stuff. So the month of May is on the table.
Anything else? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the agenda with the additions.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gasky. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion's passed. Next is our 2018 audit presentation.
Well, it's good to see everyone tonight. Just a reminder, I'm Jamie Crothers. I work for Stevenson and Company. We come out to do the Township's audit. We're there about 2 weeks, and then we have some wrap-up work in the office. And I know that you've had a copy of the audit report. So there's a lot of information in this audit report. So I've prepared a handout with the key talking points tonight, and I believe John just passed those out right before the meeting. So I'm going to focus on the handout tonight. But when I'm done, if there's anything in this audit report that I haven't covered that you want to talk about, I'd be happy to answer those questions. I've also left business cards with John, so if there's throughout the year or even at this point, if there's anything that's non-audit related, they'd like to get a hold of me, my email's on there, my phone number, so those kind of questions can be directed at any time towards my email. So when we come out to do the audit, there's 2 main parts to our audit. We look at the numbers in the township's records to make sure that they're materially correct. And then we also look at your internal controls or your checks and balances. And if we see any weaknesses in those internal controls, we report those to you as well. So we'll start out with the year-end figures. So the township received an unmodified opinion. That's the best opinion available. And what that refers to is after we have done our audit and you recorded our audit adjustments, these numbers in this audit report are materially correct. So that's what that means. You can rely on those. So tonight we'll focus on what's considered your major funds here at the township. And of course the first one is your general fund. So your general fund ended the year with over $1.7 million in cash. That's a decrease of about $37,000 from the year before. Your general fund had over $3.3 million in assets. That includes that cash that I mentioned above. It also includes $1.4 million in taxes receivable. So that's your December levy that was levied, but it's for use in 2019. That was receivable at year end. You had $113,000 approximately due from the state, which is mainly revenue sharing. $103,000 of that was state revenue sharing. Now, to offset those assets, the township had about $1.6 million in liabilities in the general fund. Included in that is about $55,000 in accounts payable. So that's your goods and services that you received in 2018, but due to timing differences were paid for in 2019. about 96,000 in accrued payroll. That's for payroll and withholdings and MERS expenses that were earned in 18, but due to timing differences, paid in 19 again. And then the big number there is the 1.4 million in deferred inflow for that taxes receivable. So the accounting standards require, since you had that levy as of December and you had a lien on those properties, that we record a receivable for that, but they also want us to record a liability that shows that that's really for use in your next budget year. So that's what the big number there is. So general fund revenues totaled about 2.6 million and expenditures totaled approximately 2.9 million. Revenues decreased approximately 346,000, but that's mainly due to state grant revenue decrease for that trust fund grant for the property purchase in 17. And then also the Iron Bell Trail grant of 27,000 received in the prior year. That revenue decrease was offset by an increase in federal grants for a patrol car of about 17,000 and an increase in state shared revenue of about 25,000. This was your first full year that you received cable franchise fees, so you saw an increase in that of about 48,000. Your expenditures decreased about 328,000. Again, that's a large part of that is from capital outlay from that beach park property. So you had the revenue and the expenses last year. And then other small increases in other departments offset that decrease from that property purchase. Your general fund had transfers in from the Old Orchard Park Fund of 185,000. That was 15,000 less than in 2017. Transfers in from property operation and maintenance of 46,000 and the water fund of 62,000. The general fund transferred 40,000 to your road improvement fund. So overall, your general fund ended the year with a fund balance of over 1.7 million. That decreased about 31,000 or 1.7%. Fund balance is at 58% of current year expenditures, so your general fund balance is still healthy at year end. If you were to take into account, take the transfers and the sale of capital assets out, though, you would have a $305,000 loss in your general fund. So, your general fund is being subsidized by some of those other funds, mainly the Old Orchard Park Fund. The next fund I wanted to talk about was your property operation and maintenance fund. You ended the year with over 2.8 million in cash. That's a decrease of about 16,000 from the year before. You had approximately 2.8 million in fund balance. Fund balance increased about 22,000 from the prior year, and that's after the transfer to the general fund of 46,000 and the community center fund of 40,000. Your sewer disposal system, you had unrestricted cash of approximately 1 million. That was an increase of 334,000 from the year before. Total assets of 5.7 million. Keep in mind that 4.2 million of that is the cost of your infrastructure assets, so the actual sewer system itself, it's not cash. That's offset by liabilities of 3.1 million, which is mainly the bonds payable for your sewer projects in the past. You did have some rate increases in 2018, and that increased your revenue by approximately 42,000. So it went from 785,000 to 827,000. And your net position, which is fund balance in this type of fund, increased 215,000 approximately. Your water fund had unrestricted cash of over 1.7 million. Total assets of 10.3 million. But that also includes your water infrastructure assets and then also your investment in Huron Shore Utility Authority of 8.2 million. Water had an increase of net position or fund balance of 368,000, mainly due to a federal grant that you received in the current year for that water project. Your Old Orchard Park Fund had 545,000 in cash at year end. Had operating income of 307,000, and as we talked about earlier, it was able to subsidize your general fund with a transfer of 185,000. The final fund I wanted to talk about tonight was the Health and Community Center Fund. That had cash at year end of about 59,000. There was an operating loss of $74,000 in that fund. There was a transfer in from property operation and maintenance fund to help cover that loss of $40,000. So the overall loss after the transfer was $33,000. I wanted to keep in mind that the loss does include depreciation expense of $34,000, so that's a non-cash expense, but still an important expense. It represents the wear and tear on that building and your assets in that building. So the loss, if there was no depreciation expense and no transfers into that fund, would be approximately $38,000, to give you a picture of what that fund looks like. Another important calculation that we've talked about the last few years, it's called the GASB 68 calculation, and that is in regards to your defined benefit pension plan. So this was a significant change to the accounting standards about 3 years ago. And the township has a defined benefit pension plan for its police union. So under this new standard change, it was the first time that you had to recognize your unfunded liability on your financial statements. So if you wanted to see that in the actual financial statements, it is on page 12, and it's the last liability. And at year end, it's over 1.8 million. That increased about 347,000 from the prior year. And the main reasons for that happening was that MERS had an investment loss on your account of $104,000 this year. Contributions to the plan were approximately $99,000 less than what was paid out to retirees and beneficiaries. And also in this calculation, there's interest that accrues on that liability. So that's what caused the increase there. So accounting standards have a way of taking a very simple concept and making it complicated. But if you were to look at it from a simple form, it's really calculated as basically the difference between what the actuaries think that you're going to have to pay out in pension benefits versus what you already have set aside in a trust fund at MERS. So, there are several footnotes in regards to this pension calculation, so if you wanted to look at those, I listed the page numbers there. They go from 45 to 48, and there's two other schedules on page 50 and 51 and 52. Last year was the first year that the township had to file the new form, the 5572, with the state of Michigan regarding this pension plan, and this is again due June 30th this year, so you'll want to make sure that you get this form in again to the state of Michigan. I'm happy to report that you will not have to do a corrective action plan because they require a corrective action plan if two things are met. If your funding is below 60% and your annual required contribution or what you have to pay into MERS, if that's greater than 10% of your governmental fund revenues. So you're only 58% funded right now, but your annual required contribution is under that threshold, so you won't have to do a corrective action plan for that. But it's important to make sure that form does get filed by June 30th. So moving on from the numbers side, there's the internal control matters to talk about tonight as well. So if you wanted to look at the full actual internal control report, you would find it in the unbound letter at the back of your audit report. That's where the full letter is. This is kind of a summary of those tonight. There were 7 findings in the current year, so we'll go through those. The first one is the financial statement preparation controls comment. This is a repeat comment. I want to point out that 100% of my governmental clients have this comment. This is required by our auditing standards that say if we assist you with the preparation of these financial statements, or if there's one material item missing from these financial statements, if you were to prepare them, then we would have to have this comment. The state of Michigan recognizes that most governments in Michigan are going to have this comment to the point of where when we turn in your audit, we have to fill out a checklist. And one of the things that they ask us is, does the government have any comments besides financial statement preparation controls? So they recognize it's going to be there. They don't expect you to fix it, but it has to be there. So I wanted to point that out. The next comment is the lack of controls over the utility billing process. This is a repeat comment. One thing that I do want to point out is that there was some progress made this year on this, but there's still a ways to go. There were several errors that occurred in the utility billing process at the township in 2018, and that's because of the lack of controls. So besides the errors, there's also a significant risk of misappropriation of assets when there's not controls. You know, there's a lot of cash that goes through your system there with utility billing, so these controls are important. I'm happy to report that during the second half of 2018, the superintendent did start reviewing utility billing registers before they went out, and that did identify several errors prior to your customers being billed. So we would like to see you continue that process. But the following recommendations are just to further safeguard your assets and strengthen that process. So besides looking at the actual billing register, there are some reports that your software provides that we'd like to include in that monthly review. And that's the zero consumption report and the estimated reads report. So we'd like the superintendent to also pick up those reports and look at them and make sure everything looks good there. Another area that there needs to be some better controls is over billing adjustments. So billing adjustments is when someone goes into the utility billing software and manually adjusts someone's bill. It doesn't go through the cash receipting process, it's a manual adjustment. And in the past year, there was no one reviewing those billing adjustments. So the utility billing person could go in there and adjust someone's account, and no one was looking at that. So we recommend that as part of his monthly review that the superintendent prints a report directly from your system to make sure that all billing adjustments are included and reviews that report to make sure that those not only have explanations but seem reasonable. And to take that a step further, there were utility billing adjustments being made during 2018 that no one other than the utility billing person was even aware of. So they were just going in, deciding there needed to be an adjustment and making the adjustment. So we recommend that as a board, you set a threshold that says, hey, the utility billing person cannot just go in there and manually adjust someone's account without some review and approval prior to it happening. We recommend, again, that they get that approval from the superintendent. Finally, in the past, the township had tracked the unbilled water use on a spreadsheet and compared that each month, and it was reviewed by the township superintendent. Somewhere along the way, that process got lost. We'd like to see that reinstated, where you take the gallons that are billed to you from Huron Shores versus the gallons that go out to that's billed to your customers, and that's never going to be 100% equal, but at least tracking that and looking for reasons as to why the difference. We think that's important as well. The next comment has to do with internal controls over the financial software applications. And I know that you as a board have been working on this, and again, that there was progress made since the last audit. So when we came out to do the audit last year, if you'll remember, we reported on a segregations of duties issue, where in the software, there was employees in the treasurer's office that had access to utility billing, and they could make adjustments in there. And so we recommended that access was taken away from treasurer's office employees. And as a township board in December of 2018, you adopted a policy, and included in that you had who should have access to what module. We looked at that. We didn't have a problem with that. The issue that we have is that when we came out to do the audit, it hadn't been implemented yet. So we recommend that you fully implement your policy, and there were still some users that were employees that are no longer employees of the township that were still in your system. So, we would like to see that cleaned up as well. So the only people that have access to the system and the only users in the system are actual employees. So, hopefully by next audit you have your policy implemented and this won't be an issue. So the next comment is a new comment, and that's the review of general journal entries. Again, in the township software, a lot of times the general ledger is adjusted through other modules. So the information in the general ledger may come in through a cash receipt or accounts payable or payroll, but you also have the opportunity to go right directly into your general ledger and make a manual adjustment. We'd like to see that those manual adjustments reduced and the other modules used, and I'm happy to say that there has been progress made on that. But somewhere along the way, the review and approval process for manual journal entries, there isn't any review process when we came out to do the audit. So currently, the clerk, the deputy clerk, the treasurer, and the deputy treasurer, and the administrator all had access to make manual adjustments. So we would like to see some review over these adjustments by two individuals or someone that has no access to make the adjustments. I think there's several different reasons why each of these individuals has to have that access. So one way to get around that is to print out a monthly report right from the system that shows every adjustment and who made it. It's available in your system. And then have two people review that and say, oh yeah, you don't want to just have one person reviewing that, especially if they have access to make the adjustments. So I think it's a relatively easy solution, but it's an important one. The next comment has to do with accounting for camping permits. During our audit, we conducted a thorough examination of the internal controls out at Old Orchard Park, and we do this every year. And while the majority of our previous internal control recommendations were implemented and working properly, we found one area that could use some improvement. We believe that the accounting for all camping permits should be sequential. So every camping permit number should be accounted for in some manner. When we did our testing, eventually there was reasons why some camping permits were out of order and weren't in the documentation. However, we would like to see that each day the supervisor look at those camping permits, and if one isn't there, document why it's missing or document why it's void, and that will stop problems before they occur. So that's our recommendation for that. The next comment is a new comment as well, and that's for the recording of interest on investment accounts. So when we did our audit procedures related to cash and investments, it was noted that interest was not recorded for certain investment accounts. It was on others. The effect of this weakness is that the general ledger balance was significantly lower than what you actually had in the investment account. So we recommend that interest on those investments is recorded monthly and that those accounts are reconciled monthly to the general ledger to make sure those balances are accurate on a monthly basis. The final comment is a new comment as well, and it is in regards to bank transfers and their authorization. So currently, the treasurer and deputy treasurer may initiate during 2018, both the treasurer and deputy treasurer were allowed to make bank transfers between accounts without involvement or authorization by another individual. So what we recommend is that each year you meet with your financial institutions with an approved account listing and make sure that the financial institutions are aware that these are the only approved township bank accounts and that funds may only be transferred out of our bank accounts to other accounts approved on this listing. And then we also recommend that you work with each of your financial institutions to see what other protections that they may have in place, whether it be a PIN system where when there's going to be a bank transfer, one individual offers their PIN to make the transfer and then they call and contact another person for their PIN for authorization. Some banks do have that available. So we recommend that you work with your financial institution to figure out what other options they have for you. So I wanted to point out that there were two comments in the prior year audit that were corrected in 2018. Last year we had a comment for signature requirements for checks where there's certain state laws that say what the requirements should be, and in our sample this year we didn't find any discrepancies in those checks that we selected. And then also the use of interfund loans in lieu of reimbursement of expenses. We didn't see any of those issues as well. Those were also cleaned up. I did want to point out that between Aaron and Jamie and John and Dave, they spent a lot of time working on solutions to these issues that are in the letter. And while we don't audit what their corrective action plan is, those are available in that full letter, and they're under the view of responsible officials. So I know that they've been working on solutions to these problems. So you can find those there. I wanted to point that out. I do also want to say that when we come out to do the audit, Jamie and John and Dave have been very helpful. And we're there for, like I said, 2 weeks, and they're all trying to do their own jobs and their day-to-day jobs, but they're also getting constant questions and interrupted by the very nature of an audit, and they don't make us feel like we're putting them out or that we're a bother, so we do appreciate that very much. So, is there any questions on anything I've spoken about tonight?
I had one question.
Okay.
And we just received this tonight, so I hadn't had a chance to review that. But in
Okay.
the letter that accompanied the packet, under the internal controls over software, and you talked about that, number 3 here.
Yes.
But I was confused because it seems to be contradictory.
Okay.
The first paragraph in the middle where it says, however, as of audit fieldwork, this had yet to be implemented and some employees still had access to unapproved areas.
Yes.
But then in the final paragraph, it says, since audit fieldwork has been completed, the township has implemented the financial software access controls. And at the bottom, it says, all users that are not current employees of the township. So-
That's under the view of responsible officials. So this is the township's response to our finding.
So
So
this,
they're saying once we left, that it's been fully implemented. So since these are comments, we will test that again when we come out to do the audit next year. But they're saying once you left the field, which we would have left in the end of March, we've since corrected that issue, is
So-
what they're saying.
between March and
Tonight.
May 16th,
Yeah,
When this
they're
was
saying
printed?
that they did
have been
that.
totally corrected.
That's what they're saying, yes. I haven't
Okay.
tested that, but that's their
Okay, so that'll be
response.
part of the audit next year.
To test it, yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep,
Hi,
you're up.
I'm up, I guess, yeah. Welcome back, Jamie.
Thanks.
Nice to see you again. So, just like last year, I've got some questions and comments. And,
Okay.
So welcome back to round 2, I guess, is that
Okay.
great? So let's get started. So before I get into specific questions, I wanted to start with a couple of general concerns. In your report, you didn't acknowledge that the township superintendent position had changed, that we had lost Mr. Stalker and hired Mr. Schaefer
Okay.
in June of 2018. And to a reader who's unfamiliar with Oscoda Township, even possibly our own residents reading this, they're not going to see or maybe know when that date was. It's not recorded. So I just believed personally that that was material information that I thought certainly characterized this particular year.
And that would be a good thing to put possibly in the management discussion and analysis, which is prepared here by the township. There's nothing in the audit standards or the accounting standards that says that has to be disclosed anywhere, but that could have been disclosed in the management discussion and analysis. It would be a proper place for that to go if the township felt it was warranted.
And so is that possible to do now, or is it opportunity been lost because we've already printed it?
I would say that it's been lost at this point unless you wanted to,
Fine enough.
have them all reprinted, which would add some cost to things. But
And so now, you oversaw the 2018 audit.
I did.
Great, thank you. And would you say that you and your team followed the policies, procedures, and used all the tools that make Stevenson and Company's proprietary work product proprietary?
That make it proprietary.
Yeah.
I guess, can you further expand on that?
Yeah.
Like if you're asking, did we follow the auditing standards that we're required to follow? Absolutely.
Of course. The question is, that you've referred to your work product as proprietary work product in the past. And so I'm asking you if you followed all the policies, procedures, and whatever.
As far as
soft
keeping
tools that are unique
thresholds
to-
and things secret, yes. So like, has anyone been provided with our risk assessment of where we think things, certain areas are risky and what we're gonna focus on? Or what's our materiality threshold for items that we think are material versus not? Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have a peer review process where the AICPA has another firm from around the state come in and look at our audit work papers and all our documentation. So we are audited as well.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Okay, so I'll address your audit findings in the sequence that you presented them.
Okay.
You also just reviewed them. So the LACA controls the utility billing process. So you've explained in the past that other municipalities who are clients of Stevenson use BSNA software.
Yes.
And as a result, how familiar would you say that you and Stevenson are with BSNA software?
I wouldn't say we're experts, but we are fairly versed in it. You know, we've dealt with BSNA, again, with several clients. I've had several interactions with their support, so I'm by no means an IT expert, but I do believe that we have a good understanding of how the software works.
Fair enough, I'll avoid those this question. All right, so in this report, you recommended regular review of reports and specifically called for the zero consumption report
Yes.
and an estimated read report.
Correct.
I appreciate seeing this recommendation because these reports have been available for years in BSNA and they're valuable in us kind of reconciling, if you will, to maybe misuse the term, to understand what is being done and what is happening in our water and sewer system. But this recommendation would have been really useful as advice in prior audit years where I don't believe we mentioned these report names.
I would have to go back and look and see if those actual report names were mentioned in 2017.
It's okay, it's just this advice I think is really important because we haven't always had, well, let's just say our folks have probably been less knowledgeable of BSNA than you were.
Okay.
And so I think the advice would be useful, just as a
Okay.
point. So anything else you would have in the future would be really
Okay.
welcomed by me anyway. So you recommend, quote, each month all billing adjustments also be reviewed by the superintendent. There was a quote there that you had. And by the word also, I inferred that you're implying that a review process already existed in 2018.
For the second half of 2018, it did. Superintendent Dave was looking at the billing registers prior to them going out.
And
Yes.
was that all that the review process entailed?
That was the main part. I think it was a work in progress, and maybe Dave can expand on that, but I think that's where it started. And then when issues were found by that initial review, then maybe other things were dug into and other reports were ran. But it's my understanding that that was the starting point, and the main, I guess, control was reviewing that.
Yeah, and I very appreciated that we caught a number of issues as a result of it, for sure, right?
Right.
Who, in your opinion, should be doing those reviews? Not that this is a bad choice, mind you, but when you're looking at other municipalities with water and sewer systems, who do you really prefer? Who do you like? Or
I
what's your
think that
preference?
it's a good idea to have the superintendent do that. He has little access to, or no access to cash receipting, except for through the administrator of the system, but he's not in the treasurer's office collecting, cash and collecting payments, and he also isn't cutting checks, so. And also with Dave, I know he has a knowledge of what's going on with the system, so in your case specifically, I mean, I think that Dave's a good choice. In another municipality, I might not think that that's the best choice, but I think in your situation, that Dave's your best option at this point.
And that makes sense, and I see where you're going with that. I have some thoughts on this, but I do understand where you're coming from. So, you are probably aware that Mr. Stalker, our previous superintendent for 27 years, was not an accountancy payer or auditor.
Right.
Right. So are you recommending, and I think you've already said this, you're recommending Mr. Schaefer do the review because of his extensive auditing and accounting experience?
I believe he has a good understanding of accounting, and I think that helps, but not just for that reason, also because he doesn't have access to those other cash
That's fair.
cash in and out processes.
Yeah, okay, so fair enough. So, well, I'll continue this and we'll see where this may go, because
Okay.
it's really more of a viewpoint, and there's, that I'm concerned, and just want to get an idea out there for everybody, not just you, but the board as well. But my thought here is that by adding Mr. Schaefer as a new reviewer, we're kind of suggesting, by not having stated it specifically in your report, that there must have been deficiencies in 2018, and we did note that our review, Mr. Schaefer's review, did catch deficiencies, did catch a problem, and prevented problems from actually being mailed out in invoices or some such other
No, I
mistakes.
did say that.
Yeah.
In my audit, I
Yeah,
did
okay,
say
good,
that.
fair enough, good. And so, I understand your recommendation to add Mr. Schaefer as this new and additional reviewer. However, here's where I'm coming from on this, is that supervision of the utility billing department shouldn't require extensive audit or accounting experience. And to your point, most of your municipalities probably don't have that experience that we have here with Mr. Schaefer. So what I'm concerned about is essentially the recommendation that the role of the superintendent from here on out be an accountant.
I'm not asking him to do the accounting work. No, he wouldn't actually do the work. It's an overview review of the process. I think that, if you were to move that to a different position, again, with Jamie's office and the treasurer's office, they're collecting the payments. So that's just not the right fit for that. Controls wouldn't be good. John would be a little bit better based on he's not collecting the payments. He still does have access to other modules and the cash going out. I guess I'm not suggesting that Dave starts doing the actual utility billing or being the accountant for the township. More of, a lot of times you do see either the city manager or a superintendent taking review and approval role on a lot of things. So that's not uncommon for me to see that.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. So we have a better sense of where the line is drawn here, thank you.
Right.
So now, I guess then, was John or Jamie involved last year in reviewing the, anything out of
Not last year.
okay,
Now, years ago, Chris Carrasco was clerk. She had in the past done the utility billing process. She was in that position before she was clerk.
Right.
So when she became clerk, she started reviewing and doing that process because she had that extensive knowledge of the process. So it made sense for her at that time to do that. So somewhere in between the transition between Chris and John, that internal control got lost in that shuffle. Because we had this comment last year too, as
Right.
well. And
that's right.
I'd have to check for sure, but I believe there was a comment in 16 as well regarding utility billing.
Yeah, I think it was under a different title, but you're basically
Yes.
the same concept, that's
Yes.
right, exactly. Okay, good. Well, so I guess then my comment, because we as trustees are not part of the process or the discussion that involves Mr. Schaefer, Mr. Weed, Jamie McGuire, and John Erdine, when you come in and have this discussion. So the trustees are kind of using this opportunity now to play catch-up, in a sense,
Okay.
to have this discussion with you. But essentially, my thought and my only concern, which is really just to put it out there, it's not so much to address something that you have said now that I better understand your direction, but that we need to make sure that we aren't belaboring, Mr. Schaefer, who is already busy with whatever, with his job, right? With administration and supervision, with also trying to leverage then his accounting and auditing experience, where that really was never the role. We didn't hire him for that, wasn't the job description. It was just nice that he had that skill.
Right.
And it's been invaluable since he's been here for that, with that, so, okay, thank you for that. Okay, so then, you recommend that the township reinstate their previous practice of tracking unbilled water use and
Yes.
maintaining its water loss spreadsheet. And I wanted to ask the board, since I didn't know that this had stopped either.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask, does anyone on this board know when these actions ceased in 2018? What happened? Is any background on that? Do you know who was doing it before? Do you know who was doing it before?
I believe that a previous employee with FNV was assisting your utility billing person at the time. I think when there was some turnover at FNV, that was something that got lost in the shuffle, because when I came out to do the audit and requested that document, it wasn't able to be
Right, it
provided.
wasn't
So
there anymore.
my understanding was that it somewhere got lost in that transition at FNV.
Okay, that's unfortunate. Well, thank you. All right.
Mr. Moen knows what information to provide at this point now.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good. Well, that's fine. I was trying to figure out why it wasn't getting done last year, but thank you very much. All right. All right, and then, and you touched on this already, and I think the answer is probably obvious now with your summary earlier, but in the summary at the end of this audit report, you characterize that the lack of controls over the utility billing process as a situation still exists. Yet you described that some improvements early in your report had occurred, and it would have seemed then that the improvements simply weren't sufficient to characterize this weakness under progress made. But to keep it
Correct.
in
There
that
was-
far right column.
There was still some major issues that needed to be taken care of before we felt comfortable really moving that. But we did also want to give you some credit and give Dave some credit for what he had done,
Right.
because there was improvement.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that department was admittedly in quite a mess. So, yeah, he inherited quite a mess on that. Okay, so in the internal controls over financial software applications, so I recall that we've had a segregation of duties conversation, and you mentioned it in your summary as well just a moment ago. But I didn't see in this year's audit report that specific material weakness. Maybe it's because it's sort of wrapped into other wording or something, but not specifically that. But you're saying from your summary earlier that we still had that in 2018. Is that right?
Well, I'm saying that all your software application issues hadn't been corrected.
Yep.
So the policy was implemented, and that's great. It wasn't implemented, it was adopted. But once it's implemented, then those issues should be taken care of. But, we just wanted to point out that it was adopted. We know that you are taking steps towards correcting the issue. But yes, the issues when we came out to do the audit in March were still there.
Yeah, and that one actually floored me when I read it, because I could have sworn that by the next month in July, when I made a motion to do a review and clean up the permissions in BSNA, and it was assigned to Mr. Schaefer, and I think then Mr. Weed got involved, and I know that something occurred, and I thought we took the low-hanging fruit, which was get rid of the user IDs for people that don't even work here anymore. So when you found them sitting there again, I was really just floored to see that. And I honestly have to say I'm sorry, because we really talked about this a lot. So I kind of can't figure out how we got to that point.
And I guess that'd be something that I don't know if Dave wants to speak to. I know based on their conversations, I think once they started to implement it, they ran into some issues of they took access away from certain people and that they needed that access. I think it was kind of a work in progress, but I can let them expand further if.
As an IT guy, I'll tell you, to help fill in what you're saying, that the software BSNA has a complex security system. You can do many things with it, and you can also wreak a lot of havoc with it. And it isn't simply a matter of 2 or 3 choices and you're done. And Jamie's commented on that numerous times.
Oh, yeah, the last couple of weeks have been a peach.
Yeah,
So on the access controls, because Mr. Schaefer was new, I took on the work with that. And I first started out with finding out who had what specific access to what. And I requested that all those accesses be printed up, which resulted in a book that was 5 times thicker than Mr. Byers' binder right there. There's that many different access controls involved per account. And after going through that, I decided we needed a simpler method, and that's where we created that chart. And then the policy was reviewed by executive staff and department heads to ensure that everything correlated. Adjustments were made, re-reviewed, and that's when we adopted in December. Then when implementation was about to start, it was getting close to audit time, and we realized that we better hold off on doing any adjustments right before the audit so that we had access into what we needed to based on the history of things. And then once the audit was done, a timeline was put in place as to when accounts were going to be terminated and new accounts established with those different access controls. And so that's been completed at this point now.
Right, yeah. It was a major project. For sure, thank you. All right, yes, Brandon, thank you. Okay, so next category, it was the review of general journal entries. So would you characterize a manual general journal adjustment as a matter of an accounting thing or more of a supervision type of a thing? You see what I'm
The
getting?
actual making of the journal entry is an accounting position. Review and approval could be more of a supervisor position, but yeah, definitely making the manual journal entries would be an accountant type position.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you. So, all right, so then once again, would you explain to, I think, everybody in the room here, what the purpose of one of those manual entries does?
While there could be several
Okay?
Scenarios? Answers, yes.
Okay.
One of them would be to correct a mistake that was made, a mistake made through another module, a mistake made, sometimes moving of funds between funds. If something is originally charged to the wrong fund and someone catches that and says, oh, really, this should have been charged to this fund. It should be noted that most entries should be able to come through the other modules. So procedures should be in place to limit manual adjustments. I think that the township has gotten better at doing that, but there's still some room for improvement and making sure that the information goes through the other modules. I don't think you'll ever fully eliminate the need for some manual adjustments. Again, people are going to make mistakes, but they should be minimized.
I'm tracking with that. Okay, so I know last year, Stevenson charged Oscoda Township $7,875 to identify 72 audit adjustments and internal control adjustments, another category way of using that same adjustment. And then Stevenson donated $3,150 back, or essentially just donated it, took it off the invoice, because we balked, because we didn't know you were doing this work and it wasn't pre-approved, and we ended up paying the other amount. This year, we're looking at 54 similar type adjustments, correct? And I understand that Stevenson isn't charging us for that.
Correct.
Now, I understand that these adjustments, the activity of generating or determining where one of these adjustments needs to be made, it requires some looking. It's not like you run a report and the system
Correct.
tells you.
There's a lot of work that goes into it.
Yes,
Correct.
exactly. So with that, I'm not looking for another bill for the township.
Okay, right.
But I'm curious to know why Stevenson isn't charging us for it this time.
Well, the main reason is when we did our original bid, we expected a certain amount of those adjustments based on our previous experience with the township, and those were built into our contract.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So last year, that number, as you can see, was 20 some more than that. So we felt that it was warranted to ask for additional fees. Now, I'm not saying that we aren't donating some of our time this year, but with the reduction of 20 some journal entries, we didn't feel it as necessary to bill you extra in this year.
That's the reward for improvement.
Right. Right, exactly.
All right, well, fair enough, all right. So the adjustments that you did end up finding, the 54, so these were adjustments that we hadn't made ourselves,
Correct.
and had we made others ourselves?
Yes, there were some that were made. There were some accruals that were made this year that were not made in the past. So, as I alluded to earlier, in last year's audit, there was significant time taken by our staff at Stevenson and Company trying to figure out interfund loans and receivables that really weren't supposed to be there, and expenses double counted. There was some grants that the money didn't come directly through the township, and it was never recorded anywhere on the general ledger. So there were things last year that took a significant amount of time that weren't there this year. So that cleaning up of those things did help.
So not just the number, but the characteristic of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, great to hear.
And to be honest with you, last year there were times where when we were trying to figure out how to correct them, and the answers took a long time to get the answers. No one knew what was supposed to happen. And so figuring out the puzzle last year took more time than it did this year.
It's one of the reasons why I wouldn't want to do your job, frankly, but especially when you're walking in and it's almost like you're reading somebody else's book.
Right,
And
yes.
you're trying to figure out what the plot is. So,
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, okay, so next question. So in your report, you stated, and you mentioned in your summary, that there are currently 5 people capable of entering these manual adjustments. And you already stated, I was going to ask you if you were announcing the 5 as being too many or too few, but clearly it's too many, and you're trying to lock it down is what I think you're asking us to do. Is that right?
That would be nice. I don't know if it's practical. I think as a board, it's something that you'll have to decide whether, if it's going to hinder your day-to-day operations and really make it difficult to operate, then I think having this control of 2 people, and not from the same office. You don't want the clerk and deputy clerk, or treasurer and deputy treasurer. But I think that risk can be mitigated by having 2 people review them. So I think it's a cost benefit that you're going to have to weigh. If it's going to hinder your day-to-day operations, to limit the amount of people that can make those entries, then there is a good control as far as review to work around that. So that's something you'll have to decide as a board.
Okay. And then finally on this topic here, so while we made progress with the adjustments we did make, but considering there's still 54, what are these 54 adjustments really? What are we doing? Are these things that we could have made? Are these things which, is it something that maybe training could help with? I mean, I'm really looking for advice since you're looking at the detail and I'm not.
Right. I do think that there are some things that you could do here, and with a little more training that those could be corrected. There are certain things that we've always assisted you with that aren't as, I don't want to say as big of a deal, but there are certain records like tax records or special assessment records where they're kept on a subsidiary, and the information is correct on the subsidiary and given to us, and that just takes us, a minimal amount of time to make that entry. So those I don't think are a big deal. When there's actual mistakes and certain accruals, then certainly there's some room for improvement there, and that could be corrected and with some training fixed. And I will say, and we talked about it, there are 20 less this year, so
Right.
we did see some improvement, so maybe we can keep seeing more and more improvement. And we do try to discuss our entries, with the staff and say, if there's an issue that we think that can be fixed for next year, show it to them and say, here's an issue, maybe next year you could do it this way. And we don't just give them to them with no explanation.
Yeah, I figured that was the case. Yeah, thank you. All right, so then the next one, the recording of interest.
Yes.
For the investment accounts. So, not recording interest indicates to me that the accounts were never reconciled, and I think you stated that in your report.
Those
So-
accounts, I do want to point out that most of the accounts were, these certain investments were not. So there was reconciliation for most bank accounts.
Yeah, oh, very good, thank you. Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask as well, but fair enough. So What is your understanding of who is supposed to be doing reconciliation of accounts?
Well, in the past, the treasurer's office had done it. It's my understanding, based on what I was given for the corrective action plan, that that's going to be separate. The only thing, and I've pointed this out at the exit conference as well, is, Jamie has the responsibility to oversee those accounts, so I don't have a problem with the bank reconciliation process moving over to the clerk's office, but I do recommend that Jamie still oversee that process because that is her responsibility as treasurer, so.
And that makes sense, yeah, because now you're getting separation of duties, but you're also maintaining oversight, so.
Right.
That makes sense, okay. Okay, and I guess then, when we're talking about the interest that's missing, was it once or twice, or are we talking like?
It
the
wasn't
Robinson-
every month.
Okay, so it's sporadic.
Right. It was not every month. I just know that at year end, the balance didn't match the statement balance. So, but it wasn't like nothing had been done with that account all year either. To give you the exact amount of months, I can't give you that off the top of my head.
Not important. The next topic of the bank transfer authorization control. So, are you familiar with positive pay?
Somewhat.
Okay, because I know that this is my somewhat as well.
Okay.
Is that it's a general feature, we call it a feature or a service that different financial institutions offer. But exactly how it works, I wasn't sure, and I was wondering if you could kind of just give us a quick little rundown.
I guess I would rather you ask the financial institution
Okay,
on
fair.
that.
So they have all different
My
ones.
understanding is limited, probably about as much as yours. I don't think that actual bank transfers between accounts are included in that. So I think positive pay is a great control. I don't think it necessarily covers what I'm alluding to.
Right.
So I would still like to see what I recommended implemented as well.
No, fair enough. And I guess
If I
maybe-
could jump in there, we've already
please, I was
signed
gonna
up
say
for
the next question
positive
was for
pay.
you.
Yeah, we've already signed up for the positive pay.
Yeah, good.
So, yeah, it isn't the same as bank transfers, and we have already instituted that as well.
Yeah, and I got that from the officials' responses. So
Yeah.
I learned that, and then, so the question I was going to ask you, Jamie, was, so how did you envision that protecting us from fraudulent transfers if possibly that service was limited to certain types of transfers, as opposed to, I mean, we do a lot of other transactions, not just transfers within our
Are you talking
accounts.
about the positive pay still?
Yes, I am at this
Okay,
moment, yeah.
we, besides outside the scope of what she wanted us to do with the transfers, we took advantage of the positive pay also, just because of different things happening with the internet,
yeah, sure.
that type of banking thing.
Totally.
How it works is we create our list, like that's our list here, that you have of the checks that we are writing. We send that list, we upload it to the bank, and they keep it. And then when those checks come through to clear, they will say, okay, this matches, this matches. If they come across one that they don't have that matches, or the amount is different, or the check number is different, they hold it out as an exception for us to approve it. And they'll say, hey, these are the checks that we have for you to approve today. Here's an exception. Should we release this? Should we not release this?
Oh, that's great. Okay,
kind of
good.
thing.
So that helps. So, okay, good. So then, in your officials' response, I presume you wrote most of that, if not all the response. What was the dual controls that you described in the response?
The dual controls is now when Jane will go in or myself will go in to make a transfer. There's only so many accounts that we have transfers that you can actually make a transfer to. Not all the accounts have that access, so they'll be non-existent. You are not allowed to make transfers from certain accounts. DDA, LDFA, the CDs are all the accounts that are not allowed to do any type of transferring to and from. Myself, John, and Jane, because in case Jane or myself are not here, we needed one other person that would be in the building to be able to authorize or initiate a transfer if it was necessary. You can't carry it over to the next day. If she initiates it that morning, I have to do it before the bank closes that day. Otherwise, it's lost and it won't get transferred.
Got it.
So she logs in, she makes the transfer. We get an email from the bank saying there's something awaiting to be transferred or to be released. Can you please log in? Then you log in, see what's out there, confirm what she's working on, and then you can release it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we give up the speed and convenience, but we get some more kind of a
Right,
lockstep.
oh,
you
definitely.
know,
I'm,
commitment
some of the
that is
stories
right.
that I heard at this last conference, I'm glad we took advantage of it.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you referred to other kinds of safeguards that you were looking into, and I was wondering if you had anything in specific, or,
ACH transfers also, yeah, we're working on that. I just want to be sure that with payroll especially, because we do direct deposit, that I know that it's only a short window of when we can get that turned in order for everybody to get paid the next day. So I want to make sure that we have safeguards to make sure that,
Yep.
yeah, that they do get paid if something happens and everybody seems to be out of the building at the same time and there's nobody there to approve it. So just working on that with the bank right now.
that's cool, that's actually great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So then, just sort of additional points here, even though we're done with the basic review. So I wanted to ask you a question of you, this Jamie. So, so I noticed that the LDFA that was assessed last December didn't appear in this audit, and I wanted to know if you had anything that, like, yeah, so I
It
just want
is.
to look, I want to see what you were thinking, so what do you see?
It's in the audit. It's in the back, page 64
Okay, so it's in the audit itself,
and 65
okay?
are the financial statements of the LDFA.
So it's the very last pages,
Yes.
okay? And so, were you aware at the time, at the end of this fiscal year for us, that the assessment for that tax was wrong?
We were not aware at audit time. Jamie subsequently made us aware of that. So when that number in there, that property tax receivable is adjusted, and that's correct. That's the correct amount.
Just to be clear, it's not the LDFA's capture that was wrong.
It was the DDAs.
It was
The
the
DDA.
DDA's 2 mills.
Right.
Right.
That
Yeah,
was
so
the
that-
conversation. Right.
That is reflected. The proper number is in the audit report.
No, that's right, and because it was my understanding that the tax rate was entered in such a way as to levy the dual tax for LGFA and DDA, and that's how that worked, so
The
yeah.
2 mills was applied to the LDFA's properties also. So they
Right.
paid tax on it.
Correct.
And we collected it.
Yep.
But it was never distributed to the DDA. Well, we distributed it to the DDA so that they could pay it back, basically.
Exactly.
And that'll happen at the July border review.
Exactly, and that's coming up. Okay, good, and I think it's something like $46,000 or something like that,
Yes, right around
There.
that ballpark.
ballpark. Okay, good. Okay, good, so, that's good. So, then, thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
I appreciate your time.
Yep. Anybody else have anything for me?
Just one quick question.
Yes.
The utility billing has been sort of a problem that you've observed over a couple of years.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're aware, we changed our procedure with utility billing late last year.
Yes.
We contract with F&V. I was just wondering if you were able, in your auditing of the accounts, notice any improvement in that
That
since they have
individual
taken over?
didn't start until after year end, so we didn't get to work with her at all. So we haven't seen her work yet.
Okay.
So,
We're hoping that'll improve. That's the bottom line.
right. Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next is the public hearing for Resolution 2019-18 relinquishment of jurisdiction. I make a motion, we enter into the public hearing regarding this resolution.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes. All right, we are now in the public hearing. For this, anyone may speak at the podium regarding this subject matter itself. Is there anybody who wishes to speak?
Is somebody going to give an overview of it?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Jamie.
Is somebody going to give an overview of it or no, or?
Do we need to
This
read
is our
it?
next, I mean, this is a.
Right, I just, that way
Another
if
public
anybody knew that
hearing
what you were
regarding
talking about, they might want to say something.
This is relinquishment of jurisdiction of a road off of Loud Drive. Does the board have any comments?
Only with the resolution itself, the format of the resolution, that I just wanted to make the board aware of. I would envision making some minor formatting changes, nothing of substance to the resolution itself.
Okay.
Okay, there being no comments, I make a motion that we come out of the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Gayaski. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion is passed. Now we enter into our first public comment period. This public comment period pertains to subject matters that are listed within our agenda. There's a 4-minute time limit. And when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself. Do we have any cards?
We do, Mr. Mark Miller, but I believe he just left.
Do we have any other cards?
We don't.
All right, the floor is now closed to public comment, and we are now into the consent agenda. Are there any comments regarding the minutes? Both of them from May 10th, 2 of them from May 13th, and 1 from May 16th. Any comments regarding the finance for payment of bills of $240,115.74?
I have just a couple of quick questions. On page 102, there is a payment to Stevenson and Company for a notice from state and amending a return, the amount of $295. I'm just curious what that would be for.
So this dates back to, I believe, 2017. The township and the state of Michigan differed in the amount of use and withholding tax that we remitted to the state. And we demonstrated our case. We had this Mr. Moran with Stevenson and Company help us or give his opinion. And it took a few tries to make our case stick with the state. And that was Mr. Moran's assistance with that.
Okay. The other, just I think you probably know the answer, but it's under Old Orchard Park on the visas. There's 2 separate listings for security light and 2-way radios. 2 separate as the same thing for different amounts.
It's probably because it's charged to 2 different departments, or different line items possibly. What page is it on?
107 here.
107.
It's the same item being purchased twice. It just
Same amount?
a different amount.
So probably
Probably
one's
just-
for the lights and one's for the 2-way radios, would be my guess.
Well, they both say security light and 2-way radios. But
Right.
would it be at 2 different times?
Nope, probably one's for the security, she probably just put it all on the same line item. Let's see, 741 and 931. I'd have to look and see what 741.
So my interpretation of the report is that there's one invoice that covers the security light and 2-way radios. One of them is being charged to 509-000-714.
Right, it's 2 different fund, yeah, 2 different GL numbers. So that's why,
Share description.
Okay. Both under Old Orchard Park.
right.
Okay, all right.
And then I had two. On page 102, there are two refunds under general unallocated at the top of the page, and I was just wondering, because these appear to be insurance-related, number one, why does it look like, why would we be doing a refund of premium, and why is it going into general unallocated? Just curious.
You said page 102.
Yeah, right at the top two transactions.
Dental and vision, John.
Yeah. I don't see the reference to the refund.
Oh,
It's
negative.
just a credit, not
I
a,
see the credit
yeah.
on the far right.
Oh, I'd have to check. I'd have to pull the bill. I can get back to you.
I know, that's fine. Okay, good. And then also, at the very bottom of the same page, the second transaction from the bottom, it's a Visa charge with the explanation that says prisoner transport. For $43 something.
The police department makes prisoner transports, so they pay for their meal, they get their meal paid
do.
for, that type of thing when they're transporting.
I
at a certain
literally
distance.
looked at that and made it.
Not the prisoners, the police.
I thought to myself that they're going to get pizza or something like that. I'm like, what the? I'm like, wow, okay.
Transport either for gas or for meal, probably a lunch or something like that, depending on how far away they have to
Okay.
take them.
Fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move we approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Subcommittee reports and project updates. Steering Committee and Downtown Summit.
All right, so the session on the 16th of May was heavily dominated by the preliminary report, the finalized report of the RRC baseline report, which goes over the 41 evaluation criteria, and we get a color-coded red, yellow, or green. And so out of those 41 evaluation criteria, it details pretty much where we're at and where we need to go. And that was the main topic of discussion for that steering committee update, as well as an overview of the progress being made with Beckett and Rader for form-based code. And they are slated to come back on Tuesday, July 9th, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Warrior Pavilion. We're going to be going over some of the efforts within the downtown. Form-based code is going to be implemented in the B1 district, which stretches from Division Street up through Evergreen. And in that presentation, Beckett and Rader gave an overview of the redevelopment opportunities within the 23 corridor in that B1 district, as well as the RRC, so redevelopment ready communities. They are going to require, the MEDC is going to require that we prioritize those development opportunities and engage the public as far as what the community wants to be able to see in those development opportunities. So we're going to be talking about downtown, some of the development opportunities, the Warrior Pavilion, the Tuesday after the 4th of July, the 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. So it's a public meeting. It'll be posted. Everybody's invited. And if nothing else, come enjoy the view, and we'll have hot dogs and chips and soda. So.
Nice.
All right, recap of the Road and Sidewalk Committee that was held this morning.
All right, so this was based on a early May update. We had a Road and Sidewalk Committee meeting. We spoke with some of the concerned citizens, and we committed to getting estimates from the Iosco County Road Commission on options and what those quotes would entail. Based on the Road Commission putting together all of the quotes for the concerned citizens, they came back. Bruce Bolin from the Road Commission was able to answer and engage with the concerned citizens as far as what's happening with the road and the options for the road. At this point, there was a consensus that the concerned residents with the road wanted to understand the outcome of the August 6th ballot initiative, the issue associated with the proposed 1.75 mils that would generate approximately $526,000 on an annual basis for 6 years to address both, road improvements, including paved roads, unpaved roads, as well as dust control application and the sidewalk maintenance and repair. So the next Road and Sidewalk Committee meeting is scheduled for August 23rd, which is the same day as the pre-board work session at 10:30, and we'll be getting together based on the outcome of the election on Tuesday, August 6th, to understand the next steps associated with the road improvements.
I would just add that the streets we talked about this morning, there was a small cluster of 3 streets, maybe 4, in Lakewood Shores. We also talked about, some of you might be familiar with Woodley Road that is outside of Lakewood Shores, south of Lakewood Shores, and it intersects with Gaston Way, and then that road turns into Tecumseh. Changes name, same road. And that's in pretty rough shape, and those people are interested in, some action. We also talked about Merkle Road out off Merton. Yes, thank you. Merton, out off Bissonnet. It's a kind of a unique situation where there's a rather lengthy approach to the residential area that goes through state forest land, a little bit through a federal land. If any of you are familiar with that, it's a long gravel road and then a cluster of houses at the end. And so we talked about different options of improving that road. And they informed us, at least I was surprised, that it was so bad that school buses refused to go out there at certain times of the year. UPS and FedEx, the people were complaining about it, and it's kind of a tough situation. So, did I miss any of the roads? I think that's it. But,
No.
Yeah. Merkle, Lakewood Shores, and Woodley. So,
And the connector roads to Woodley.
yeah.
So if it were a straight 70% share, which the road commission is required of us, the community, both the township and the residents together, to do all of those roads would be just shy of $600,000. Because Merton is so long and surrounded by state and federal land, that share would actually be probably higher than that. Quite an expense for just a few roads. Drop-off refuse program is this Saturday, June 15th, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's located at 4775 Sunset Street, which is in Asabo. Is that right?
Yep.
So please take advantage of it. We prefer it in the dumpsters, not in the woods.
If I can layer onto that also, number 3 and number 4. The 3 was the Road and Sidewalk Committee. We met this morning at 9 o'clock. And this reminder that Aaron made just now. The board heard my views on the communication letter last meeting in May. I didn't get any support on that. When we voted on it, I was the lone no on that. But I was so upset about the content of the letter that I didn't get to these other things. But I'm thinking that there are some pretty important things in the community letter, and it's probably been printed already.
Printed and just waiting to print the tax bills.
Okay. So I'm a little late, although I'm not totally late, because I did, in previous road meetings, we talked about the millage proposal And I made the comment, we're gonna really have to do a selling job, we're gonna have to publicize this. And the only mention of the millage, road millage, is the language that will be used on the ballot. Now, most of you that ever looked at millage on ballots, it's terrible to read. You don't know what you're voting for. It's legalese, and that's all that's in there. Same thing with the other item that deals with monies for the fire department. It looks like a brand-new millage, but really it's a renewal with a little wider use of the money, but same amount of money that people have been paying for. So I don't, as I said this morning, I think we really dropped the ball by not putting more things in that community. And also this drop-off of rejected equipment. We have another one of those on September. We got one coming up in a few days here that is too early for this community letter because people will see it in early July, right? But we have another one of these in September, but we don't have another community letter to tell them. We can remind people at our meetings like this, but anyway, I wish we had things organized a little better, so.
And let me just add, for the drop-off program, you need to purchase your permit in the treasurer's office by the end of the day on Friday, because they will not be issuing them at the site. So, and you do need to be an Oscoda Township resident.
Fire Department Touch-a-Truck event.
All right, this is going to be Friday, July 4th on Furtaw Field. So the fire department's going to be there lining up their trucks. Members of the community are encouraged to come out. You can see the different public safety equipment that we use. Kids can get their pictures on it and put on some safety equipment. So fun for the whole family. Starting bright and early, 8:30, Thursday, July 4th on Furtaw Field.
Questions we provided to the Air Force.
Yes, so you may recall that we took a poll and gathered questions from the local area residents and presented them to the Air Force a couple weeks before they arrived to meet with us on the 23rd, 24th of April. It is now, what is this? I've forgotten the date already, 10th of June, and we still do not have the written responses back that they promised they would have the week following their visit. So I've sent an email. I've got another one in progress. The Air Force knows that they have not responded, and they are frankly apologetic, but this is not coming from the folks we normally deal with. It's coming from Mr. Henderson, who is Pentagon. So that's it. And, oh, and one other thing, I'm sorry. So there's currently discussion of the RAB meeting for August. It may actually be in September. I think it's August 21st or September 11th are the dates that we're looking at. So it's getting pushed out. We're getting more into 3 times a year than the 4 times a year. We were started out quarterly, and it's kind of slipping.
Last week on the 5th of June, myself, Mr. Schaefer, and Bill Palmer met with the Alcona County Commissioners to discuss contracting EMS service with Alcona County, since as of yet I have not received any information from Iosco County as to if they're going to make any improvements to the current EMS service. And just a reminder that under last year's stats, Oscoda did have a response time as long as 58 minutes. In discussing with a lot of other counties, not only in Michigan, but also in other states, that to them was very unacceptable response time. So a lot of feedback I'm getting in some regards is that the averages look good, but my concern is not the averages. My concern is the outliers, the people who have to wait 30 minutes or longer, which was a significant amount countywide, including cardiac arrests. So in that meeting, we discussed the standards to implement in an intergovernmental agreement contract and the length of a millage that would be required to do this. we have the option of putting it onto a ballot this fall, or we can wait until next year. The county ambulance millage is up in the fall of 2020, so that'll be coming up for renewal. Then, so if a millage were to pass for EMS service this fall, then we'll receive the funds this coming February. The plan would then be to start implementation of the EMS service by the 1st of July of 2020. Have it stood up by then. May not be fully stood up because there's some facility issues that will have to be contended with, modified in order to accommodate the rigs. What they were talking about is 2 full-time rigs and 1 part-time rig to cover our township and to ensure a very good response times. And those rigs would not be doing the transfers like Iosco County rigs are doing. So these would be dedicated to us. There would be, we talked about the ability to gain the additional employees, the union negotiations associated with it. They're going to get us, they give us some general costs before, but by the next meeting, which is on the 14th, they're going to give us some good firm startup costs, their annual costs, reasonable standards for contract performance, patient litigation issues, stipulations on paying any extra to the Alcona insurance costs, who's going to draft the contract, and we're going to find a neutral attorney associated with that so that we don't have one attorney that has a conflict with representing one municipality over the other. Create a coverage map. The might have in there some things associated with how the fire department can help during certain situations, policies and procedures to match with Alcona's to ensure continuity and maintain current state approvals, the monthly reporting, extra personnel for the dispatch service, the procedures on how Iosco County 911 will handle Oscoda calls, and payments for, who's paying for the utilities that will be used for where the rigs are stationed, and details from how the accountant will be handling the funds. So hopefully we'll have some good details on the 14th. Then we can bring that forward to the board, and the board can decide from that information if this is something that we want to proceed with, if we want to leave it as a choice for the people, if we want to continue with the county, if we want to press the county to do improvements to the service, which, I mean, they've made it very clear to me they're not interested in doing so. But
I thought we've already pressed them. I thought that's what we've been talking about in prior reports from you. So I don't think we want to keep going down that road if it's going to be fruitless.
Aaron, what type of response are you getting from the commissioners that are from our district?
one of them stated that his portion of the county, his farmers don't want to pay for extra service. Why would they need that? The other one, I said that they aren't getting complaints. They aren't hearing complaints. So there must not be a problem. I said, but I'm hearing the complaints, and as a representative of the people, that's why I'm coming to you about this. And if I'm not going to hold any weight in this, because you're not getting complaints from other people, then why am I even here? So I asked, will you please talk to Alcona County Service, see what they are providing, how they are doing it, since theirs is a municipal-run service where ours is contracted. I said, talk to the other municipalities, such as the supervisor of Plainfield Township. I got assured, yes, I will do that. I called 2 weeks ago and asked if he had done that, and he said he had not.
Okay.
And they're seeing the same data you are.
I don't know if they've even looked at the data I have, but they know it's been generated by the 911 office. Their administrator is very well aware of the chart. Whether they've actually taken a look at it, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe they have, but again, they keep hearing back, well, the averages are saying that it's fine. You can have 50 calls that are 2 minutes, and you can have 50 calls that are 40 minutes, and your average still looks good.
That's right.
But tell that to the people that are waiting for minutes.
Tell that to the people who are frozen to their driveway.
I have two comments, and I don't have a point of view on this. I'm still listening to what you're coming up with and undecided, but I've talked to some of the people in Osable, the Osable government, and they seem to be happy with response times, and they're only across the river from us. It's not like they're 20 miles away or something. They're kind of happy. They're satisfied with response times. And I guess my second point is bad things can happen anywhere. My example is a lady I know quite well. In that complex in Baldwin Township that has Tractor Supply and various buildings, she tripped and fell inside the building and face first. It sounded like somebody dropping a watermelon from 10th story of a building. And she was told to stay there. They called 911 right away, but don't move because they were worried about a neck injury. And blood on the floor. It was awful. And it took the EMS a half an hour to get to her. And the EMS headquarters is what, a quarter of a mile away?
That's right.
From that building, you know. So bad things can happen. It isn't just Oscoda Township. And again, on the reverse, Osable seems to be happy with response times. So.
And Osable's going to have decent response times. Most of their calls occurred under 30 minutes. If they were to join with a service that we contract with in Alcona, they'd probably drop that response time by another 10 minutes or so. But whenever an ambulance has to get pulled from our area, which the unit is stationed at the Oscoda-Osable border by the hilltop, when they pull an ambulance from another location and need that one to cover, it will then move to the warehouse that's down on 23 further south. So you'll see an ambulance parked on 23. If you see one there, you know you're missing an ambulance or two in the county. And so because they're almost always stationed in Osable, they're going to get good response times. And whereas our township is very lengthy, that makes it much more difficult. And with Alcona County's response time is only running 2 units in a larger county, they didn't have any response times over 30 minutes. Whereas we're running 4.5 units in Iosco County, and we have response times over 200 calls that were more than 30 minutes.
So Alcona County currently runs 2 for their whole county,
Correct.
and they're proposing to give us 2.5 for our township?
2.5, possibly 2, depending on how they can work it out, to have something joint with their rig they have stationed in Glenny to respond to West Side calls. So last week we scouted out some locations as to where would be good to make sure we had the best coverage for the greater population and not too far away from the West Side population.
Would you envision an opportunity for the board as a whole to meet with representatives from Alcona County in discussing this before a contract gets made, or
Sure.
if we had that, like a work session setting, or should we?
That would be great. I would
Contact them
love for
virtually.
all of you to hear what they have to say. It is very impressive how they run their operation.
I think one of the differences is with the MMR people, they do a lot of transports. So there are actually times in our county when there's not an ambulance available. They're out of the area transporting patients for whatever reason. There's a serious amount of money they can make by doing those transport. Alcona County has specific vehicles for transport. That's not part of their emergency response teams. So they have these separate cars. If they have to do a transport, they use those vehicles, and then that keeps the ambulances in the county
Makes sense.
respond to calls. So it seems like a much better system that way to be more efficient for the residents of their county.
Yeah, they always ensure those 2 rigs are in their county at all
Always.
times. They will not jeopardize the ability to get to a call for a transport.
And some of my research, talking to some other counties and actually another state over in Wisconsin, several of them, they absolutely do not do transports, period. They just don't do that. If there's a transport needed, they have to get somebody else to do it, so that they can maintain the emergency service in the county, so that they're there if a call comes in for the residents.
And Alcona has reported that lately they are being called more often to the Iosco border for mutual aid because of a lack of ambulances in our county at times.
You might have mentioned this before, but who gets the money for the transports?
I don't know all the details of how that works within the county. I've told the county I am not here to micromanage it. I just want you to look at it and make improvements if you can find places to make improvements. And they said they would look at it. And now it's been several months and I've had no word back.
Can tell you the most recent information available, and that's from the 2017 audit of Iosco County, because you can't get the 2018 yet, but they had over $1.5 million sitting in the fund associated with ambulance services.
You mentioned a fall election. Are you referencing the November election?
Correct.
So they're stockpiling the money from the millage, is what you're suggesting? No answer required. Thank you. My faith still remains the same about the county. Jeez. Unbelievable.
Could we work to set a work session?
Can we do that on the 14th? The board members all want to meet for that? At the Alcona County Courthouse?
Fine with me.
That's Friday, huh?
Oh, I can't Friday.
EMS Friday.
Yeah, I think works for me.
What time? Can it be in the afternoon?
Right now, we have it scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, we can try for something next week.
I can't do it at 10 a.m.
So really, if anybody just wants to attend on the 14th meeting, and if we want to set another meeting for later in the week, we can if you want. If you want to go ahead and schedule something for,
We just have to be careful of a quorum. If we're not, unless we're setting a formal work session.
Perhaps on the 14th, we can talk to Alcona about setting a work session for our entire board to meet.
Right, that would work for that.
why don't we go ahead and set the 14th at 10 a.m. for the work session? Whoever can make it can be there. And then let's go ahead and schedule another one so that if we need to have another one with more people there, then we have that available before our next board meeting.
Well, we probably need to check on their availability
Yeah.
before we could do that.
Where's the meeting located?
Alcona County Courthouse. Bottom floor. All right. Hushra Board Township Representative Selection.
I'm sorry, back us up. Are we gonna, is that a work session? Do we need to act on that?
For the 14th, you know what, let's go ahead and do that. 14th, 10 a.m. Make a motion, we set a work session for EMS services at the Alcona County Courthouse.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Once we know something from Alcona County, we may need to have a very quick special meeting to set that work session. Since we have no idea what their availability is that week. Okay, Hushra Board Township Representative Selection.
All right. Been here a year. The honeymoon's over. So I am now asking the Township Board to appoint me as the primary Hushra Board member position and Supervisor Weed as the Township's alternative Hushra Board member position. So if approved, by the Township Board, a copy of the approved minutes of this meeting will be sent to Hushra as supporting documentation for the change in positions.
Any comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve this switch.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. John Henry invoice for emergency repair.
All right, emergency repair to the sanitary sewer force main on the south side of River Road Bridge was completed last month. Once F&V became aware of the necessary repair, John Henry Excavating was contacted to immediately resolve the issue. Your packet contains an invoice for $6,500 as well as a detail of the emergency repair performed. The payment of this invoice requires Township Board approval.
Dave, is there any evidence that the damage was done during the repair of the bridge? Or is it just corrosion and old age?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter, what you mentioned there.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the payment of $6,500 to John Henry Excavating for emergency repairs of the sewer force main on River Road from the Sewer Fund 590.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. The Sting invoice.
All right. So, this is for the Strike Team Investigation Narcotics Group. On an annual basis, we get an invoice, and I checked last year, it's the exact same amount, the $9,795.80. So, last year this was paid out of the general fund, 101,299 unallocated dues. So, in 2019 and moving forward, it's my recommendation that this be paid out of Police Fund 207 due to the nature of services provided by Sting. And this be out of line 207-801 for professional fees. It's also been conferred with Oscoda Township. They pay an annual amount of $2,865.80 to Sting, and this expenditure should not be incorporated as a shared cost when calculating the annual chargeback for the contracted police department services.
Comments?
We'll pay for it out of the police fund. Will that create a shortage?
That will be addressed on the exact same, or on the next line.
Very good.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the Sting invoice for $9,795.80 to be paid from the Police Fund 207-801.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Increased appropriations for Police Fund 207.
All right, so, based on the Sting invoice, what I am asking the Township Board is to increase 2019 appropriations, for Police Fund 207, up $18,000, up to $1,308,607. And what this is gonna be incorporated into, and the intent is for 207-801 associated with professional fees. So in addition to the Sting invoice, your packet also contains information associated with projected cleanup costs associated with increased code compliance efforts. So the township needs to appropriate 2019 funds to perform the increased code compliance efforts. Appropriating funds directed towards code compliance cleanup efforts is a new concept for the township to consider not only in 2019, but moving forward into the 2020 budget season. The cost of any code compliance cleanup effort will likely be more than $2,000 and will require township board approval. So as we go into these, they will be approved by the board. So what I'm asking is that the township board authorize a transfer from the general fund contingency to the police fund 207-801 for professional services. And this is, again, a very similar situation where the Oscoda Township, even though this is getting paid out of Police Fund 207, this would not be incorporated into the shared cost calculation when calculating the chargebacks that Oscoda pays on a monthly basis for police department services.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll move to increase the 2019 appropriations for the Police Fund 207 by $18,000.
Support?
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yeah.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Proposals for buildings assessment.
All right, so I have provided the township board with very long emails associated with several proposals from Redstone Architects, Rowe Professional Services Company, as well as William A. Kibbe and Associates. The proposals detail 3 primary tasks, including performing a condition assessment of the township's buildings, performing a needs assessment / programming of a consolidated municipal services center, and providing floor plan design services renderings of a consolidated municipal services center. So why I'm bringing this to the board is basically I'd like to hear discussion as far as the proposals as well as the next steps for the process. As the members of the Township Board are aware, these topics have been discussed at great length during the Township Board strategic work sessions. So what I'm looking for is a little bit of direction. There's several different options. We could either move forward with one of the proposals. I've asked for clarification, if there are any clarifications necessary for these proposals, or consider establishing a work session, bring in the companies and give them the clarifications in advance so that they can come with answers and answer any other questions you may have.
Comments?
My main question or concern is about I've raised it before, about the needs assessment or the condition of the buildings. My question to the board is if we made a decision already to part ways with certain buildings, should we, or why should we spend money to get a needs assessment or a condition, or a plan of how to repair, upkeep a building that we don't intend to keep? So that's my only concern. I like the phases 2 and 3, the needs of like the spatial needs, and then the floor plan or rendering for the future planning. There's such a substantial cost to the condition assessment or needs-based assessment on the condition of the buildings and repair. I don't see the need for it, and then coupled with the cost. I'd rather not pursue that avenue, but the other part of the plan I like. And the Redstone plan seemed quite comprehensive and suitable to what I at least envision us doing or needing, so.
Well, I would agree with that. My only concern was that the Redstone plan was quite comprehensive, but they were considerably more expensive. It seems to me we've had pretty good luck with Row Engineering and the projects they've worked on. I think, because they're going to use an architectural firm along with that. I would like to see us move forward and just accept their bid and let's move forward with this. I know a lot of people in the community are concerned, like you'd said, with, we're selling some buildings and it's going to make some changes. I'd like to move forward with this process and get the ball rolling on some of these projects.
I agree. We've made commitments to sell the buildings. And we've talked about how we have discussed in work sessions that we're planning and looking at other ways to put in a multi-use building where we can consolidate, bring back the area for an OCC, but in a new building, and maybe even bring other things in there like a library. Who knows? I mean, that's just consolidate. But I think that's time to actually put the money on the table as a way to put it, right? Because we talked about it so much.
And I agree with Mr. Nordine. I really don't see the need for an assessment of buildings that we have on the market for sale.
No, agreed.
So,
Are you guys convinced that the general public understands what we're talking about here? Has it ever been laid out at a meeting? I haven't missed any meetings, and I don't recall. We're selling some buildings, for what? And what are you going to replace them with? I don't know if the general public understands what's going on. We're dodging. The plan is, as I understand it, to sell the community center, to sell the base hospital, to sell the present Township Hall, to sell this building, and consolidate and build a new building on Furtaw Field. I don't know if that's been talked about enough. I'm not saying it's a bad plan or a good plan, but it seems like we're beating around the bush a little bit and not really laying it out, so.
I didn't think we were beating around the bush at all. I think we've been pretty clear about it at our work sessions.
Yeah, I'm talking about the general public, not somebody that can come here Friday morning. I'm talking about the people in this room.
In the afternoon meetings we have, all the work sessions that we've had.
Okay.
And
I did actually last week meet with a group of citizens who had questions about this very issue, and they were concerned with what was transpiring. And once I explained to them what our plan was, and that we actually have a plan for moving forward, and we actually have some money in the account that we can use for that plan, they seemed to be quite enthused about it after that.
Yeah.
So I
But
was
that's not my
encouraged.
point. My point is not if the general public likes this plan or doesn't like it. And you met with a small group of people, but I'm talking about the majority of people. Do they really know what's going on? I don't know.
I share a sense of that. I think it's been a bit disjointed perhaps, in that I would have preferred to have had a rendering of sorts before making some decisions, like listing the community center. The timing was such that certain things happen, and hopefully in close proximity, being that hopefully we get this rendering and this plan done. But I wish we had something more substantial to provide before that than just the words, us conveying our ideas through words. But, so I see a bit of a cart before the horse there from my perspective. But that's why I think this, and to see if it's even a feasible idea. I like Mr. Palmer said, I want to, and I said for some time, do this as soon as possible, so that there's something tangible to share as to a plan for replacement of services and future services in whatever format they take, whatever shape they take. But I do share a sense of what you're saying.
Yeah. Again, I don't have a point of view about it at this point, and I can see that the ultimate deal is to have something like East Tawas has, their community building where they have, police, fire, government, quasi gymnasium kind of thing, So that's kind of what we're aiming for, and that would be located on Furtaw Field. But it involves several sales, and at what point do you say, okay, we've sold the buildings, and now can we afford this new thing, do we have a place to meet? What do we do with the books in the library? And is it gonna be coordinated? Well, maybe I'm worried about something that doesn't need to be worried about, but.
That's what this what right here we're discussing is going to lay out for us.
Okay,
It's going to show the cost feasibility of it. It's going to show the layout of it. So that way we can present something black and white to the public to show this is the plan.
but meanwhile, before that you do that, we're gonna vote on selling one of the buildings tonight. I mean, it's like you were talking about the cart before the horse. We're still in the planning stage, but we're ready to start selling buildings, one of them tonight.
But 6 years ago, when we discussed the issues with the community center, and the years prior to me being on the board, when all that was discussed, it was discussed, how are we going to handle the community center? Do we need to shut it down because it's causing us to hemorrhage money?
I understand that.
So this is not new at all, and there was no plan before either. Although now we do have a plan, it's not really a cart before the horse any different than what it was 6 years ago. Because before, I see the eye rolls happening, but before, we talked about shutting down the OCC with no plan for something different.
Yeah, I know.
Now we're talking about shutting it down, but having something in the future to replace it.
You're talking, I don't disagree with, we have talked about the OCC, in the situation there is getting worse as far as how much in the red it is, considerably worse. But I'm looking at selling 4 or 5 buildings, not that one. That's the easy one to justify, in my mind.
I think they're all justifiable. This is just the first good step, though. They have to do this in order to get to the place. I would like to see the money earmarked personally from the sale of the buildings that we're looking at selling, to make sure that those things happen.
That's right.
I guess my concern is just that the public knows what's going on. And I'm not convinced that they are. I don't know what their response will be. Maybe they'll think it's a good idea, I don't know.
So what's your plan for informing the public?
Well, like tonight, let's say this was the only way of disseminating information. Until I brought this up tonight, you guys are talking vaguely about selling a building, and we got another building, and I don't see people actually mentioning what is going to be sold and the Furtaw Field project. I think it ought to be just out in the open a little more, but.
We discussed it at length in work session.
No.
It was discussed at length at the last meeting, I believe.
Right, yeah,
Okay,
I agree.
all right, I'm wrong.
But if you have a plan for public dissemination, please let us know.
I just kind of did at this meeting. Talk to the public about it and perhaps the press, so.
But you're saying that these meetings aren't enough to convey that to the public?
These meetings are for us, Friday morning meetings and so forth. And even a public meeting like we're having tonight, you're not really saying what you're gonna sell, except maybe the community center, which I said is the easy one. It's losing money like crazy. It's just bleeding. But when you talk to people, do you know that we're thinking of selling the township hall? Fire department, police department? Or do you know that we're thinking of selling probably the classiest building on the former base that you're in right now? I mean, I don't know what you think about it, but do you know that that's part of the plan? And that's all I'm saying. Just be open. Base hospital, including the new veterans modifications and so forth, the VA money that was put in.
Jim, I'm sorry, I have to ask, I don't understand where you're going with this. When we have these conversations, for all the years that I've been working with you, I've heard you talk about these same problems.
This plan of
I don't
selling 4 or
understand.
5 buildings, Tim, and building a new one on Fertile Field is not something we discussed.
No, that's
before.
correct. But we
That's
have talked
fairly
about,
new.
we have
It's
talked
not
about
too
selling these.
new, because we did talk about it with Cedar Lake Elementary School prior to it coming up for sale, which this board was never notified of when it did come up for sale.
That's right. Well, it was notified, but it wasn't passed
The
along.
board wasn't notified.
Correct, yes. But
Staff
to be
was.
clear, it's not the school district's problem.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just concerned that the general public doesn't really understand the concept of what we're shooting.
Understand that point. But what
That's
is
my only
your
point.
plan? Because you're insinuating the public doesn't know all of these things. But what would be your plan in order to disseminate that so that they are aware?
If I could jump in, I think, not to speak for Mr. Byer, but what I'm hearing and seeing is Mr. Byer put his plan into action just 5 minutes ago.
That's kind of what I'm
All I
saying.
saw was insinuation. I
Well,
didn't see the
I
action.
think you wanted
Mean it
it,
as an insinuation, but my plan to inform the public is, as John said, what I have just said in the last 10 minutes, and hopefully it may get out of this room via the Oscoda Press. I've never seen it in the press before. I don't know what people will think about it. I don't know what I think about it. I just want everybody to know what's going on.
Any other comments regarding these proposals?
back to the difference between Rowe and Redstone. I recognize what you're saying, Mr. Palmer, with regard to the experience we've had with Rowe and the cost. I had a conversation with Mr. Schaefer. The cost with Rowe could potentially go up. I suppose that's true maybe for every proposal, but they have a fourth stage that's unqualified at this point, or unquantified. So there's a bit of a variable there. But my thought with the Redstone is it just seems more in their wheelhouse. I don't want to discount the work that Rowe has done for us. I've been supremely satisfied with what Mr. Freeman and Rowe have done. But with a project of this magnitude and potential importance and community, scrutiny or how you want to say it, I'd just like to get I was impressed by their proposal, by Redstone's proposal, the most, for what we're looking to do. So those are just my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I like the fact that Rowe has familiarity with us.
Sure.
That, I think, is one of the reasons why they're less expensive. And I really don't see value in starting over with an organization that we haven't worked with and isn't familiar with us. And that's the advantage that I feel is that Rowe has. I don't have a concern that Rowe can deliver.
Yeah, me either.
So I feel that if I can get the product from Rowe, then I think I save some of that money that I'm otherwise asking another company to start over and
Sure.
Do it from scratch.
The other thought that I had that I left out of my talking just a moment ago is that if we do in fact leave out the first phase of the project, the needs assessment of the buildings, structurally and all that, maintenance-wise, the two proposals are more similar. Redstone was heavily weighted in that portion of the proposal.
Any other comments? Is there a motion?
Well, okay, I'll make a motion that we move forward with a proposal from Rowe Engineering.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gajewski. Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Can I ask a question that I may have, should have asked before? Does that include the needs assessment or?
No, without
Okay,
the needs
okay,
assessment.
I think we had established that, I just
Yes.
wanted to be sure.
F&V proposal for water system asset mapping and water asset management plan.
All right, so what you have in front of you, or I'm sorry, what's in the packet is a little bit different than what I was able to ascertain from F&V. I wanted to get the discussion going with the board. Basically, the Michigan Department of Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy, AGLE, required a preliminary distribution system material inventory to be submitted by January 1st, 2020. So all municipalities are going through this. Within 5 years, that's going to have to be verified, and that again is going to be kind of an expensive proposition to verify all of that. So within F&V's proposal, the original one that's in your packet, there are also options to link the water plans to the GIS, as well as physically map the location of valves, hydrants, and individual services. So based on trying to clarify what are those options going to cost, they were able to revise that proposal, and I sent that out this afternoon, provided hard copies. Basically, it goes up significantly from $25,000 up to $93,800. So again, this is a significant investment. What you can understand is that the SAW grant took 3 years, and that was well over $800,000. And that was an inventory of everything within the sanitary sewer system and putting that on GIS. And this is a very similar proposal as far as putting the water assets in GIS as well. So, being that this is a $93,000 proposal, and I was just able to get this to you this afternoon, I understand if you have questions, if I need to go back, obtain clarification from F&V on this proposal, but I just wanted to get the conversation started. We've been trying to work with F&V to ascertain a proposal because we know we have to submit this by January 1st of 2020. So that is a component within the proposal to meet that requirement by EGLE. But if we want to do other things as far as putting the mapping and all of the assets in GIS, that's not included in that $25,000 figure. I wanted to provide those options to the board.
Comments?
How long would this process take?
So what you can guarantee out of here is that preliminary DSMI for water services, that is going to be that's going to be completed and submitted to EGLE by January 1st, 2020. As far as everything else here, That is going to be, that's going to require further clarification. Took us 3 years to do all the assets for the sanitary sewer. Obviously, we don't have 3 years to meet the requirement, but I can obtain more clarification on how long that'll take.
Reason I asked, I just didn't want them to cram this in 16 months, 18 months, to get it done in that amount of time. It's gonna take 2 or 3 years, or longer.
It'll also,
That's what I'm looking at.
it will also take the township significant resources and efforts to be able to link and get all of the system mapping appropriately into GIS. So we're gonna have to go through our records and be able to ascertain what's the most updated plan and get that into the system.
Mr. Schaefer, we discussed this earlier, but we have this GIS data and the map for the sewer system. And it's been helpful to us, practically helpful in the field, and it's been of value to us since we've gotten it. So,
Correct.
Significant.
okay, so we're employing the use of that laptop that we were given with the GIS on it and all that, okay, very good. And we
And
obviously.
they have portable devices they take
Oh,
out
the
to the field
iPads
with
too
them.
as well, and those are actually quite, okay.
Yes.
The benefit is being realized,
Oh, yeah.
very good. And obviously, we would expect to see the same benefit with this.
Yes. But in addition to that is the maintenance assessment that'll come with it too, like we had with the SAW grant. So that way we know what's immediate,
Sure,
needs
certainly.
immediate repairs and what can wait.
And then we can go through the water rate study.
Well, and what they're driving at is that the townships fully understand how their rate structures fund these capital improvements. And considering, I believe it was the early 2000s, since Oscoda Township has increased water rates, we need to take a hard look at that and how the rates would be affected to be able to properly align the capital improvements over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Absolutely.
Any other comments?
Just one question. By approving this, then we won't have it completed certainly by January 1st, 2020, but we would be in line with Eagle's requirements from the state?
The preliminary DSMI, so that $4,200 component within there, that last component, that will be submitted by January 1st, 2020.
Okay.
Is there more discussion or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the F&V proposal for water system asset mapping and water asset management plan in the amount of $93,800.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Updates to employee handbook.
All right. So several updates to the to the township's employee handbook were discussed at the prior meeting on May 13th. Based on the discussion with the board and subsequent communication, your packet contains a revised version of the proposed changes to the 3 sections of the township's employee handbook. The 3 proposed changes are detailed on 2 pages of the township's employee handbook. Page 8 adds language that addresses DPW uniforms And page 10 addresses both paid leave days for part-time employees and the transition from permanent part-time to full-time status. So any change to the township's employee handbook requires township board approval.
Any comments?
Yeah, I only wanted to say that while I agree I'm in agreement with the changes that are proposed, I'm still not comfortable that we have addressed the bigger problem, which is the entire handbook. We're really just doing a Band-Aid here. And I just want to make sure that this doesn't, get forgotten, set aside. It's a project that I just want to make sure I'm just coming out and saying it, not to invalidate the work that we went to make the updates that we're discussing right now, but it's, I think we need to identify a Michigan employment law attorney who can actually guide us through that process. So, that was it.
Any other comments?
Yes, on the $650 per year for maintain their uniforms, I haven't seen any uniforms.
You haven't seen what?
Any uniforms?
For the police, or, you mean, others?
Or is this gonna be changed to clothing?
Got it, I know what you mean. Like for DPW.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
I changed that to clothing.
Well, but I think the term uniform doesn't have to be something you see in a policeman that clearly is a uniform. I mean, it's,
I understand that, but
Okay.
they have work uniforms. Dickie has them all day long.
right, exactly, but that's why that'd just be their version of a uniform.
I think that they had a color, that they were like green shirts and either black pants or,
Do they have colors?
that's what it used to be. I don't know if that's still what they're doing.
They do wear shirts that say
Yeah,
Department of
DPW.
Public Works.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the police contract has a list of acceptable items.
Uniform/clothing?
You may want to specify permanent DPW, full-time
Full-time
DPW
employees, yeah.
employees. As for the transition from permanent part-time to full-time, obviously, we discussed at the last meeting, and there's been changes to it. I don't totally agree with the changes. I don't think it's totally equitable for a full-time person to reopen this can of worms in the scenarios that we talked about last week or last meeting. But for an individual is laid on this scenario who's worked for 10 years full-time versus a individual who's worked for 10 years part-time, they're both going to end up with the same amount of benefits, and one's put in potentially almost twice as much work for the earnings. So I just don't see the equity there. I think the proration as to time worked and served equaling out to the benefits and it's really just a vacation. The pay has been changed, personal time and whatnot. I think that's equitable and how it was before is more to my way of thinking. Secondarily to that, there's some mention of 15 days of vacation. I only see one. I saw more before. But once we decide the way to go, the scenario contains some inconsistencies from the top half of the narrative or the language there. So just want to be aware of that.
Anything else?
Well, I would just restate my argument from our past meeting regarding this, and that is that I don't see how you can look an employee in the eye that set his alarm clock every morning, come into work for 10 years, granted not 8 hours a day for 5 days a week, but they probably would have liked to come in for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, but since we only need part-time, they come in every day to work like everybody else, go home a little earlier, but then you're gonna turn around, look them in the eye with a straight face, say, well, no, you've only got 6.25 years seniority, not 10 years. I just don't see how you could, I don't see how you could make that argument to somebody with a straight face.
I definitely see the ideal scenario. I'm just trying to look at it from what we're faced with and the reality that I see. So that, I mean, that's,
Can you explain more what we're faced with, so that I can understand that point?
I mean, ideally, yeah. I guess what we're faced with is, yeah, ideally that individual would like to be working full-time. We as a township don't have the financial ability to employ all employees that we engage full-time. I mean, ideally, we would be, potentially be able to, but that's just not the case. And I just think it should be commensurate with the amount of, time that they are employed. And that's the reality versus the ideal scenario that I guess I'm referencing.
While we're pondering over that, we have reached our 2.5-hour mark. The board needs to decide whether this meeting will continue or not. What is the desire of the board?
So if we say no, we're done?
We're done.
I don't think I've ever seen that happen.
Can schedule another one for later this week
I'm just,
at the Alcona County Courthouse on Friday.
Continue our meeting there, right? Take over the courthouse?
I'll make a motion that we continue our meeting. It's 9:30 PM.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Palmer.
Restate the motion?
I made the motion that we continue our meeting as it's 9:30
Oh, I
PM.
got it, okay. How long? Or,
Do we have to put a time on that?
that wasn't
Let's
sure.
set another time limit in case.
Okay, how about 10?
Okay, great.
Oh,
9:40?
That's optimistic.
Yeah, it is.
Ay, ay, ay.
I thought 10 o'clock was optimistic.
Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
Okay,
All right, employee handbook.
yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the employee handbook as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, no. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
No.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, purchase agreement for 5145 North US 23.
Right, so this is a placeholder item, and obviously this was, voted on at the previous meeting, on 5/13, and, that was considered a counteroffer at that point. The potential buyer recountered, and, we evaluated that, proposal, the purchase agreement. And so we were able to discuss that, being a real estate transaction, in closed session earlier this evening. So basically what we're asking the board is to consider accepting, rejecting, or providing a counteroffer to the potential buyer.
Comments?
Can I make just a comment that covers this item and the next two? And it's the least important of my harangues tonight. You know, I've been trying to be and I'm sure the rest of the board thinks this is unnecessary, but, you know, as open and transparent as possible, and I'm sure most of you think you already are. And, and like I said, this is not the biggest thing in the world, but we're gonna be dealing with 5145 North US 23. There'll be a test on if you know where that is or what that is. The next item is a purchase item for 4071 Arrow Street. And the third one is possible purchase agreement for 5671 North Skeel Avenue. Why don't we just say, I mean, get the address, okay, but maybe parenthetically say that the first one is the property of the former dry cleaners next to Dollar General. Let people know what you're talking about. 4071 Arrow Street is the community center. 5671 North Skeel is the hospital. Say it.
It probably would have came out in our discussion, maybe.
Maybe. You know, just throw
There's
it
a lot
in
of
there
people in the area that had no
parenthetically.
idea there was a dry cleaners there.
Well, I'm telling you, it was, so.
But next to Dollar General.
Well, it's a vacant lot now.
Yeah.
Vacant lot.
It was a building that housed two different kinds of businesses, so. Like I said, it's the least important of the issues that I've tried to bring up tonight, but it would be so easy to fix, and people that actually have agendas would know what we're dealing with. So,
Do we have any comments regarding the purchase agreement for 5145 North US 23?
So are we simply going to resubmit our offer with our attorney's purchase agreement as the defining purchase agreement for that sale?
That's one of the options. You want to make the motion?
I'll make that a motion that we accept the offer, the stated price with our purchase agreement wording from our attorney as the purchase agreement to be used.
Fine, I support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Purchase agreement for 4071 Arrow Street.
All right, so this was a purchase agreement that was submitted associated with the OCC, the Oscoda Community Center, and the offer is for $280,000 with the repair of the section of the roof identified.
Any comments, or is there a motion?
I move that we accept the purchase agreement offer of $280,000 with the repair request. Period.
With the repair.
With the repair request. Yeah, so we would repair it. We would repair that section of the roof
Okay.
and accept the $280,000 offer for the 4071 Arrow Street.
Support.
I would be of the opinion that we counter at the original list price and still
Okay,
And still fix the
and
roof.
still fix the roof. Yeah.
okay.
So what, we have two motions?
I was gonna say,
No,
it
there's
looks
only
like
one
No, I'm
motion.
just stating my motion or my thoughts or my disagreement with the motion, but not making a motion because there's one on the table.
Your motion still stands, Jim?
It does. Yeah, I'll just keep it for now, and let's see where we go with it.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
No.
Mr. Byer,
No, I like John's idea.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, no, Mr. Gieske,
No.
Mr. Weed.
No, motion has failed. Is there another motion or further discussion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to counter the purchase agreement, counter the offer, remain at our original list price, and agree to make the repairs to the roof.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Nordine, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Next, listing price for 5671 North Skeel Avenue.
All right, so the current listing price is $1.4 million for the Ani Medical Center. And based on discussions with the board, we were evaluating options to be able to consider the lowering of that listing price.
Comments? Or motion?
Clearly, there's been no interest in the building, so I am agreeable to lowering the price.
I make a motion, we change the listing price to $899,000.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-18, relinquishment of jurisdiction.
All right. So, Resolution 2019-18 is the resolution to relinquish jurisdiction of parcel number 063-009-300-001-00. And this is the 40 acres located off of Loud Drive. The legal description is also detailed within your board packet. It should also be noted that there is reserved from this relinquishment of jurisdiction an easement to allow for any public utilities along the road, right-of-way, as legally described within the resolution, and further, a right of access along the roadway as described above for each and every property owner that adjoins said roadway.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve Resolution 2019-18.
Support. Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Resolution 2019-19, redevelopment ready community certification.
Right, so in the board packet, you're going to find the MEDC's RRC baseline report with 41 evaluation criteria, and what the board needs to discuss and decide if the resolution should be authorized to implement the recommendations necessary to receive RRC Communities certification from the MEDC.
Comments?
It references Downtown Development Authority, the resolution does. I know that it exists currently, but doesn't plan to much longer. Should we reference that or should we not? I'm sorry,
Whereas the
one,
third.
two, three, fourth whereas clause.
Correct. So currently, they are a part of that with the Township Board, Planning Commission, and Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay. If that was the intention, then that's understood. Second, there's, again, with the resolution, I have formatting suggestions, but non-substantial. So when I execute them, sometimes I feel compelled to standardize them.
Yeah,
I don't want to be out of step with the board's intentions, so just want to make you guys aware of that.
I like what you've been doing to clean them up.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Is this, well, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is this just coming, I mean, we've talked about doing this for months and months and months, so now we're just at the point where we're ready to, like, we have so many things in line that we're ready just to do this.
Yeah,
I guess,
so,
why didn't we do this a long time ago?
so we did a resolution of intent to become engaged within the process. So I had to go to trainings in Lansing, and when I completed those trainings, we were engaged in the process. That was last September. And from there, we have gone to the point now where the MEDC has evaluated us on the 41 criteria to become certified. And based on that, the Township Board has to decide, are we going to continue to pursue this certification and get our practices in line with redevelopment-ready communities? Or, you know, is the intention not to do this? Once the baseline report is provided, it's required that a determination be made by the Township Board within 30 days of that report, and that was provided May 21st of 2019.
So we should view this as a next step in the progress of getting redevelopment ready certified.
And what this also does is helps unlock the technical assistance dollars associated with paying for the consultants to make these practices happen.
Okay.
So they're not going to unlock the technical assistance dollars unless they understand that the governing body is committed to obtaining certification.
What percentage of the way do you think we're through the process?
We're a good way. I wrestled a couple more greens and yellows from the MEDC. So if you look at that, there's only 8. So only 20% are red, which out of 40, that is a good way. We have more greens than reds and a lot of yellows in there. So we need, and what we'll get to later is the proposal of how we're going to change those reds and yellows into greens, meaning that we have completed the 41 evaluation criteria and become RRC certified and unlock more funding from the state into the community.
Do you have an anticipated date or proximity of when we would be finished to be certified?
We'll get to that more in the proposal later on. The bulk of the work is going to be August, September, and October of 2019 if the board would approve that plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I move we adopt Resolution 2019-19.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Ordinance 2019-02, small wireless communications facilities.
Okay, so the small wireless communications facilities has to do with the emerging technology associated with 5G. The ordinance was read at the Planning Commission June 3rd, and the standalone ordinance for the code book has already been approved by the township attorney. This is getting in front of the township board for approval. So To make this as simple as possible, basically the right-of-way, this is the township's attempt to be able to define acceptable and not acceptable plans for the implementation of 5G or small cell wireless communications within the township. So this was a product of the Planning Commission subcommittee, and based on that, progressed through the Planning Commission and now brought to the Township Board for approval.
Comments?
On page 314, at the very top, the paragraph, it talks about the authority having the power to prohibit above-ground installations in designated areas if that designated area exists. Do you or does anybody else know of any, do we have any of those designated areas that we're intending to put things below
We
ground?
have areas now that
We do.
everything is run underground.
Okay, so we will have, we'll
So
roll
we
out
have-
this ordinance with those.
This ordinance allows us to make that restriction on these antennas as well.
Very good. So we do have those existing areas and they'll be put into place simultaneously so that they exist.
That's one of the things that we put into this ordinance. There's a couple of different things that we can set fees, which will come to this board at a later date, a resolution for the fees for these. It restricts the underground. Where we have underground facilities, we can maintain that as underground facilities. It also provides for removal of these, because in the future, all of this communication will be done by satellite. So these are probably a temporary thing for a few years. And so in this ordinance, it provides that when they're done with these towers, they have to remove them.
Yep.
And so that covers us on that. And of course, there's a good bit of other information in that ordinance that you can read there. But this was something that the original legislature was going to put a statute in that would prohibit us from being able to restrict these. And they changed that. And so now we can't restrict them, but we can put in place in the ordinance certain restrictions on where and how and that sort of thing. So
And to give you some dimensions, these are going to be the size of refrigerators. So they say small cell, they're not small. And so we
And they're
need
ugly.
to have some sort of regulation.
My only other comment is not about the content of the ordinance, but the numbering.
Section 20?
No. Way to go, though. No, the numbering of the ordinance itself. It's ordinance number 2019-2. In the recent past, they've been 2019 and kept on. We're up like to the 263 or so. It's the board's decision. As long as it's an ordinance number that's distinct and of its own, it does not matter.
Right.
But it's out of sequence with what, it keeps in sequence with the previous 2019-1 that we made for beach vendors.
Right.
But that one broke, and I didn't notice it at the time, but I noticed it now, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Okay, so I didn't get it. So is 2 unique or not?
2 is unique.
Okay, good.
Yes, it's the second iteration of a new sequence, a new pattern, but it is unique, so.
All right, good.
Can we go back and change the 1 and 2
I don't know the process. I believe we have the ability.
or the
I don't know
importance
the
of?
process. Yeah, and again, board's discretion to determine the importance. I just thought I'd share my,
Yeah, probably just an administrative thing. We just get on an agenda and fix it, yeah, so.
Well, how about we leave the numbering
Sure.
as is right now, and
Yep.
at the next meeting, if there's a recommendation for doing something different or changing the numbers from previous ones, then we can address it then.
sounds good to me. Now is not the night to monkey with numbers, I suppose.
No, I agree.
Is there a motion?
Right, you've got 9 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-02 as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call?
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Cummings,
Yes,
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Amendment to ordinance 2013-256 for fireworks.
All right, so this ordinance was rewritten pursuant to the change in state law regulating the possession and/or use of fireworks. This pertains to the permitted hours of use, along with the handling of civil infraction fines, has been updated to be in line with the state law. The ordinance was read at the Planning Commission, June 3rd meeting, and this is a standalone ordinance for the code book and has already been sent to both Mark David and Al McGregor, both the police and fire chief, for review.
Have they had any comments back?
They helped craft it.
Good, so they're in agreement with the way it is now. Okay, good.
Doesn't affect us, does it,
What do you mean?
as a township?
We light off fireworks in line with the state law. You are correct, sir.
That's what you mean.
Making sure, I don't want no
Good
tickets.
to know.
That's funny. We get a ticket from our fire department. That's great. Okay, well, then I move that we accept the amended version of ordinance 2013-256 regarding fireworks.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Proposal from Place Leap Township's pursuit of redevelopment-ready community certification.
All right, so while the township went through the 2019 strategic planning process, we had Mr. Joe Borgstrom from Place and Main Advisors come in to the community about 4 different times, hold sessions with the public and targeted customer focus groups. And so what we're trying to be able to do with this proposal is align our practices with the RRC best practices. And so in this proposal, it wasn't part of the action items in my report because I wanted to be able to have Resolution 2019-19 for RRC certification be approved by the board prior to the board evaluating this proposal. And what you'll notice, it's part of Place and Main, as well as the community branding and marketing specialist, the Arnett Muldrow. So it gives background. Place and Main, obviously, the township board is familiar with, and Arnett Muldrow is the company that will be the driving force associated with the community branding and marketing exercise. What you'll see in here is the total cost of $40,000. Now, that will not be a $40,000 net cost to the township, and we are working with the MEDC to be able to unlock the technical assistance dollars, as well as attempt to apply for a waiver so that all $40,000 is covered. What I would like to be able to do is pursue this proposal in light of that waiver or the township not qualifying for all $40,000.
Comments? Is there a motion?
What I will also, I was able to hand out to the township board, there was an alternative proposal that was obtained in February of 2019. That vendor obviously has not been in the community with throughout the strategic planning process. So at the work session, I mentioned a dollar figure that came out to 3 components costing $107,000, $107,555. So obviously, there's a large difference between a different proposal and that of Place Leap here.
I would just say there's one on page 332, there's one of the comments from that gentleman on their plan, and it says, quote, "plans that get implemented." That, I like the sound of that. You know, we come up with a lot of plans, and oftentimes they just sort of fall by the wayside. This indicates to me that, you know, this company will work on it and we'll get this implemented. That's important to me, I think, if we're going to spend money on doing something, that we follow through with it.
I agree. We've hired other places, Hyatt and Palma, different things like that, and recommendations have been made, and then we've never really gotten to a finish line.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the $10,000 match if necessary for the place and lead proposal.
Support. Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. We have now reached 9:58. We still have 10 more items to go through, plus public comments and board comments.
I'll make a motion that we continue the meeting till 10:30 PM.
Support.
Or any portion thereof that we.
Right.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
No. All right. Item number 2, authorize the $10,000 township match for place and leap proposal, which we just
Just did.
Did.
that. So is number 1 asking for something different than number 2?
So basically, the proposal from Place Leap, I was hoping to be able to get the board to approve that proposal.
Okay, so we have
And
the
then the
dollar
10
amount approved.
Yep.
So is there a motion regarding the proposal itself?
I'll make a motion that we accept the proposal from Place Leap. I also want to make the comment that we did accomplish some things with Hyatt, Palma, and the other studies. It's not like we didn't do anything, just so you know.
Right.
Okay, 'cause yeah.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Established budget work sessions.
It's that time of year again. What I am envisioning is something very similar to last year, where the department heads come in front of the board and justify the proposed 2020 appropriations. So what I was hoping to be able to do is establish work sessions for either Tuesday, July 9th, Wednesday, July 10th, or Thursday, July 11th. Preferably to have 2 work sessions where we would have the department heads come in. Obviously, the plan would be to get the proposed 2020 appropriations in front of the board for discussion and review, so we could maximize our face time with those department heads without interrupting operations. So Tuesday, July 9th, Wednesday, July 10th, or Thursday, July 11th. I was hoping for approximately 1:30 in the afternoon on those days, or 2 of the 3.
I'm good with the 9th.
What's that?
I'm good with the 9th. Or the 10th right now. Pretty open on those 3 days.
For me,
I can do the 9th. I prefer the 10th and 11th.
10th and 11th. Okay.
Any or all?
I'm sorry?
Any or all?
Okay. Let's do, how about Wednesday the 10th and Thursday the 11th at 1:30 here at the library.
I make that motion.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request from the Oscoda area schools.
All right, so this request from the Oscoda area schools was obviously contingent on the purchase agreement to the, for the OCC. So this list has been provided to Real Estate One to communicate to the potential buyer associated with the equipment and/or inventory out of the OCC.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I do have a question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Since we countered, you said it's contingent upon the sale, is it appropriate to do it in light of a counter to the offer, or?
Make a motion pending the sale?
Do that.
Any other comments? Motion?
Make a motion to approve the request pending the sale of the community center, contingent upon and pending the sale of the community center.
Support. Motion by Mr. Nordine, support by Mr. Weed. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Planning Commission appointment. So I had received a letter from Mimi McDonald requesting to fill a vacancy on the Planning Commission. This vacancy currently, right now, is for an alternate position, but of course, the Planning Board can change those positions around as they desire. The expiration date of that appointment would be 31 December of 2023. Are there any comments?
Is there, maybe I missed it here, is there a vacancy and what?
Yeah, there's seven, the 7 seats are filled, and then there's an 8th one for an alternate.
Okay. Okay.
And I do have a vacancy on the Board of Review, if anybody has any recommendations.
I'll move to approve Minnie McDonald to the Township Planning Commission as an alternate.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request from the Oscoda County Agricultural Society.
Based on discussions with the township board, we can remove this from the agenda. I should have removed this from the agenda.
I understand there's a problem with this, but you said based on conversations with the board?
Yeah, so,
You're talking about last Friday?
so basically, it was brought to my attention, these kinds of requests, I normally just take to the board. I guess we got it last year and, it was never brought to the board. It was determined that, we cannot make donations like this.
So this was decided Friday morning?
It was not decided, but it was mentioned.
That this, I didn't know last year it was already determined we can't make a donation to the Agricultural Society.
So if the board wishes to make comments on this or a motion, they may do so.
I wonder if they get any money from other townships, you know? Because the law you just cited that we can't do that would apply to Burley Township and Oscoda and Baldwin, you know, I'm just curious. Rhetorical question.
It's okay, I'll take it up. I mean, it's applied to us too when we were doing it years ago. So
I mean,
we're
you can make a
didn't-
personal donation to it. I mean, and maybe that's why they're giving it to you to recommend, you know, to solicit any type of a donation, not
So-
necessarily from the township.
It's an excellent point.
Because they do send it every year.
Yes, they do. I think it's kind of a form letter thing.
Any other comments regarding item number 6?
No.
Request from the Oscoda Rotary Club and Oscoda Lions Club.
All right. So this is in conjunction with the 4th of July community celebration. And this is to have their 7th annual 4th of July community picnic and celebration at the Oscoda Beach Park.
I'll make a motion that we approve the request.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Rodine, yes. Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes,
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Power plant election.
All right, so the power plan election, page 357 of the PDF, there are 3 candidates, and the township has been asked to mark one only. So based on this, I was hoping to discuss with the township board as far as the power plan election.
Comments? A motion?
Does anybody have any knowledge of any of the 3 candidates that
No.
they can share with the rest of the board?
No.
Just the bios that are there. In reading those, I believe, unfortunately, my computer didn't get the memo. We were gonna go till 10 o'clock, so it's dead. So I can't review, but I believe my preference was the 3rd on the list there. Just,
It would be Diane Randall,
yes.
Supervisor Assessor of Roscommon Township.
Based on what?
Just her qualifications. She's been in there for 20-some years, I think.
Actually, Diane Randall was past president of the MTA.
Yeah, I thought that name sounded familiar.
Yes.
Any other discussion or a motion? Consensus?
I'm fine with that, Diane.
Does the board feel compelled to make a decision? I mean, it's not required of us.
Do we need a motion? Get us off the square
We
one
need, we
here.
need something, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, either,
Is
that's
anybody interested in voting on it, or not really?
what I'm asking.
not really.
Yeah,
Not really?
Not
sort of an
really.
uninformed decision on my
Uninformed
part.
decision, yeah.
Okay.
Topic is important, but I don't know how to evaluate it.
Do we, Oscoda abstain from voting on this subject?
Go with me.
I move that we vote for the candidate that Bill talked about, Ms. Randall. Is it Randall?
Yep, Diane Randall.
Yep.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request from the chamber.
If I can
Oh,
make
yeah,
one
go
quick
ahead.
note, not to delay us any further, but the piece of the letter, what do you want to call it, the communication from MERS that got incidentally inserted is actually quite interesting. If you guys review that, it's some good news from MERS. Unrelated to the topic, but it's valuable information for the board, so.
Request from the chamber. This is to waive the fees for the use of the Warrior Pavilion on October 9th, 2019, associated with a nonprofit current and potential board members as a resource for the local and civic clubs and services.
Does this meet our policy to waiver?
It's a nonprofit roundtable committee.
Does it benefit the community as a whole? And that's a very, while it sounds like a broad statement, it's actually a very narrow statement. In other words, would this fall within the realm of donation law?
I thought we had a committee that looked at this and see if it fit the policy. We do not now any longer?
I don't think so. I haven't heard of it.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Martin, you're a member of the chamber? No?
Not any longer.
Not anymore.
I am.
You are. Long enough to know that have we let them use the Warrior Pavilion before? Do you know that? Or are you fresh recruit?
No, I don't know, because I often find myself not going to all those events, but I am a member.
I make the motion that we do waive the fee and allow them to use Warrior Pavilion.
Is there support?
My only question is it enough of a benefit to the entire community to make it worth this donation?
If the Chamber of Commerce of a town is not a good thing for the public, then I can't imagine what is, really. I agree that, their good is probably weighted a little bit more toward the business community.
Right.
And specifically this eastern end of the township. But
This isn't
Come on.
technically a chamber event. It's sponsored. It's a roundtable event for nonprofits.
Right.
Like the Lions Club and stuff like that. So that is a community benefit.
Right.
Anything
they
could
do a
be,
lot.
anything could be justified as a benefit to the entire community. Does it pass the test if it were put in front of a judge? That's the question to ask.
And do we have the policy on this topic yet or not?
We do have a policy for
Policy
waiving the
test.
fee.
We do.
Okay.
And somebody supported it, right?
I don't think I got any support at all for my motion.
No, I'm pending.
I'll support your
let's-
motion, and it's during a weekday, and it's only $100 rental, so during a 4-day for 4 hours during a weekday. So I'll support it, because all those nonprofit people do a lot for the community, and if it'll encourage people to go and check it out, or invite more people to come into it, then the more the merrier.
And I'm happy with all the dialogue, but I wanted to try to get an answer to the question about the policy, because I don't have that policy to know whether or not this is
The policy
within or
allows for
outside
a
the
waiver
policy.
of fees if it is for a nonprofit and benefits the entire community.
And benefiting meaning, is it open to the public also, which it is.
If the state attorney general comes down on us for doing this, contact me, I'll pay the $100.
I'm sure they're busy. I know.
Okay.
Make it known before the vote that having thoroughly researched donation law, spending a few years in doing that, I will be voting no on this because I do not want to risk the liability to the township.
As a note, I've got the policy, I'll send it out via email to the board.
I actually wish we could review that before it comes to the board. I feel like the board now is the committee that reviews the legality of it, and I think that this is the wrong forum to be doing that. That makes sense.
The policy,
saying?
the policy indicates that the board can, at its sole discretion, do it. It doesn't name a committee, at least the version of the policy I have.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire.
Yep.
Roll call?
Mr. Gasky,
No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
No.
Mr. Palmer,
No.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
No. Motion's failed. Next steps to review for township policies and procedures.
All right, so what I have in here is an email from Clerk Nordine. He's also handed out hard copies of the policies compiled associated with the various topics. He has identified next steps as far as identifying a group or subcommittee in order to review these policies and procedures.
Yes, hopefully this concept would be of use to us, given the previous topic of not having policies readily available to board members. I've consolidated them from a book that was hard to sift through to more condensed, hopefully more usable to the board, to staff members. I'd envision eventually getting to a point where they're updated, and current, and then they can be disseminated, a book, a referenceable document. But to get there, I've consolidated them. There's probably more that exist that weren't in the binder and that I missed in my pulling together. But I would envision we need to, as I laid out in the communication, need to review them, establish a process for reviewing them, a group to review them instead of just one person's set of eyes, establish procedures to go along with most, if not all, policies, create new ones potentially, eliminate ones that are useless at this point in time, outdated, things of that nature. So
I'd be happy to help you with that, John.
Okay.
If you need some help.
Sure. We had a conversation about the makeup of the committee, and Mr. Weed shared that having a board of a trustee from the board would be helpful. I think that's wise too. Sure.
I also volunteered on Friday.
Okay. All right. The one thing, in my opinion, that I think should be a core or foundation is, I think the clerk, in their role with the association with the policies and their responsibilities to the policies, should be involved, and the superintendent should also, I think, from the day-to-day operations and overview of the staff and how it affects every aspect of the township. From there, the size and participation is, I have no other input. So.
I only have a couple corrections to your list, though, however.
Okay.
My investment policy was amended, and it's been certified, and I don't have to update it any further.
Wonderful.
Working on the credit card policy, as the board members know, so on updates, and we recently updated the designation of depositories.
Very good. That's the kind of stuff I am very
So you
interested in.
can cross those three off your list.
Keep going, Jamie. We won't need this committee.
Right,
exactly.
okay, yeah, let me go down it again here. Those are the ones that jumped out at me right away.
John, if I could request that the product of this be a PDF that we can have on a laptop,
Yes.
we can look at, it's kind of like, portable.
Very good, and I have it existing currently.
Yeah, that's okay, but it's
Yeah,
not
okay.
ready yet, so
Very
it
good.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
I will work towards that end,
Thank you.
absolutely.
And I think it's gonna be wise to be able to bring in subject matter experts, potentially, department heads and/or other members of other, boards or commissions within the township to be able to, bounce ideas off as far as implementing changes to current policies or reviewing the existing ones.
The clerk and treasurer's listserv has been very helpful too and instrumental. People, all you gotta do is put it out there and ask them if they have a policy, and they're more than happy to send it to you and help you. I've had them call me as far as the credit card policy that I was working on. Had three big city treasurers call me personally and say, hey, saw your email, what are you looking at? And send me information. So they were happy to do it.
Obviously, the output, one major distinction to make is whether it's a group or a formal subcommittee. The legalities of that are still, I've asked Mr. Eppett's opinion, I need more specifics. But, so that's one major distinction to make, and then also with the notion that whatever that group or subcommittee determines is just a recommendation to this board to then formally act on, or, obviously have input and change, so.
Also, there is a laptop tablet one somewhere. I have that somewhere. I'll locate that for you.
Yes, yeah, I've got,
Oh, okay.
yeah, just whether more
date on it?
recent
Okay.
versions exist.
I'll volunteer on that committee also. I'll make a motion, we form a formal subcommittee consisting of Mr. Palmer, Ms. McGuire, Mr. Nordine, Mr. Schaefer, and Mr. Weed to go over the township policies and procedures.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Gasky,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed.
I have one more note similar to that, is I see as an existing need similar in the ordinances. Not that we need to address that tonight. I don't know if this same group would move on to ordinances or another one. It's a large task, but just so the board's aware, I think the need very much exists.
Well, that's kind of the task of our planning commission subcommittee.
Right.
We've been tasked to work on the ordinance, make revisions and updates and that sort of thing.
My understanding, I could be wrong, is that the focus narrowed to like land use ordinances, or is that eligible for all ordinances?
Zoning 165 ordinance.
Okay, there's all sorts of other ordinances, like the fireworks one, well, potentially, there's all sorts of,
That's the code book ordinance. And
yeah, exactly, ordinances other than the 165. I mean, that's the one ordinance, and then there's some other that deal with land use, but there's stacks on stacks of other ordinances called code book, or, just other existing ordinances that need to be updated or be done away with because they're obsolete because of the time change, or.
Well, ideally, our subcommittee was planning on dealing with the 165, and then once we complete that, move on to the code book.
Sure.
But
That sounds great. I know it's a
you're
long
talking about-
process.
You're talking about years down the road, because we
Absolutely.
keep getting diverted. We have to write new ordinances to go in the code book.
Absolutely.
And in the 165, so.
If the planning commission has the ability to do that, to take on the standalone ordinances and the ones that don't relate to land use, then that sounds good to me.
Okay. I guess it just depends on the time frame you want to have this completed, because.
Let's concentrate on this one first right now.
Sounds good to me. I
Yeah.
don't even have that, yeah.
Yep, you got
Just acknowledging the need.
Get the
4
last
minutes.
one.
Placeholder item for MERS determination.
All right, so, the current practice of the, township is to, compensate the volunteer firefighters that also serve on the, police department to be able to, have their, compensation count towards, the MERS retirement system. So that is the current practice. And the 2018 audit exit conference, as well as MERS as an organization, has asked the township board to consider either formalizing the current practice or formalizing a practice that's contrary to the current practice.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Comment. I know that we've been doing this for the police officers that have been involved, but there's many people that are on the volunteer fire department that don't get that benefit. And just because we've been doing it for a long time doesn't make it right. So I think that we should discontinue doing that and move forward.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll support it, put it on the table.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine? Yes. Mr. Byer?
No.
Mr. Cummings?
No.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
No. Motion has passed. Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
yep, motion has passed. Okay, we've reached 10:30. Does the board wish to continue with the last two items, or are we going to adjourn?
Can we continue? Is there like a limit or anything like that?
We can continue on if you desire.
I make a motion to continue the meeting so that any public has a chance to make comment.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Nordine, support by Ms. McGuire.
To continue the meeting until completion. So,
It's public comment.
yep,
Roll call.
could be a half hour. All right, Mr. Cummings,
No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, we're now in the public comment period. There's a 4-minute time limit. Anyone may come up and speak, and please introduce yourself when you do. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Of course I will.
Only one still awake in the audience.
I'm going to be very quick at this, as quick as I can, but you know I like to talk. So, first of all, I would like to say that Robert Tazier, Oscoda Township, and also Planning Commission member. What Mr. Byer brought up earlier today in this meeting was about public participation. I would like to point out that in the past, we have never had a public participation plan that was written out for that very items of what you said about bringing people aware of things. Under RRC, one of the things that we need to get that green box in is a public participation plan 1.2.1. See, I do my homework. And that is writing a policy so that we can inform people on these very issues that we discussed and continue to discuss, so that people are not surprised at what's going on, that we can bring that out in a regular written plan. And how are we going to get people involved to know what we're talking about? So that's the one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was that on one of the things that the Planning Commission and the form-based discussion on July the 9th is a town hall meeting, and the Furtaw Field is in that B1 district under form-based, and that'd be a perfect opportunity to discuss some of that very issue about what's happening down there. And the other thing that I'm disappointed that you didn't allow the Chamber of Commerce use of the nonprofit status for the Warrior Pavilion, and I'm going to tell you why. You said you didn't know if it qualified. The roundtable, nonprofit roundtable, is for every nonprofit in our community. That's what the roundtable is for. If that doesn't qualify, I don't know what does. So I just wanted to make those points out. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Thank you, Bob. That's the first time you and I have agreed on.
We've agreed before.
Are you feeling okay?
My name is Jason Rush. I just want to speak on the buildings that were for sale and that were up for bid and offers that were submitted out here and stuff. We'll touch base on 4071 Arrow Street at 280,000 offer with fixing the roof or whatever else. I think was a salvageable offer, because then you go down to your next purchase one at 5671. There's not enough interest involved in those, and you drop hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you're going to squab over 15,000. I just don't think that was a very viable decision on the end of that for what's there. So that's just my comment from looking at the dollars and cents that you guys seem like you're doing. Tim had a good offer, trying to put that motion through, but for $15,000, I think it wasn't a very wise decision. That's just my comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, then we're on to board comments. Does anybody have anything?
I'm in the process of getting ready for summer taxes. It'll be going out July 1st. I know everybody's looking forward to that. Again, the drop-off program is this Saturday. If anybody just tuned in, 8 to 2. Come on in and get your permit. You can get it till Friday at 5 o'clock. It's $10, and for residents of Oscoda Township.
I have a couple of questions. They're not announcements like Jamie's. What's going on with the Artisan Market building, the old ugly building that was fixed up by the DDA behind Truly Yours? What's going on with that as far as use, and who's in charge of scheduling? And is there any plan or organization on that at all?
I can answer a portion of it. I have the book if anybody wants to call to make a reservation or to see what the cost is. I have the book in my office, and they can call the treasurer's office, 739-7471, and get that information. I'd be glad to send it to you. And actually, the DDA members are still the key component. I contact Marty Gajewski, and he comes in and gets the information and gives people a call if they want to look at it or if they need to ask any other questions. And then we coordinate the scheduling for the event that's going to be held there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
My second question and final is when the DDA, I guess, is technically still alive, right? Is that right, Aaron? Or is it?
Final meeting will be on Wednesday.
Okay. They generated approximately $30,000, a little less, I guess, per year in funding. What is happening with that? It's just gone?
No, any funds, any assets of the DDA become assets of the municipality.
Okay, but I'm talking about future, let's say it's 30,000. I know it's a little less. But what happens to that 30,000 in 2000?
Portion of the tax capture goes to the county, and the other portion goes to the township.
So we get some of it.
Oh, yes.
Approximate, what fraction of 30,000 do we get? I really don't know. I'm not just
I
trying.
thought we were going to be ceasing the capture.
We are ceasing the capture, but it
Oh.
goes back to normal property assessments, disbursements of property taxes.
Oh, okay.
No more DDA capture, which means the DDA captures the county portion of it, which was close to $30,000. The county will now get that money in the future tax captures, and the township will get the remainder of that. We'll get the other portion of it that the township is owed property taxes.
The TIFA capture actually for the DD is more around $65,000 total.
The TIF is dissolved, and there is no more 2 mil capture.
So that those are dissolved.
Okay. So the community is losing how much?
About 30,000 a year.
All right. Thank you.
We'll be getting that money back. some of it. We'll be losing the county's money.
Correct.
But the
Which is-
township's portion, yeah.
Which I believe the county's portion is
Is the
about the
30,
30,000.
Yeah.
So we're losing, as a
Right.
community, as a net to the community, $30,000 or thereabouts. That was my concern.
But I don't call it a loss, because the efficiencies made out of this will be a gain.
There's also captures out of the senior center and fire equipment, stuff like that. That
Sure.
money will be going back to those entities
So
also.
what the DDA was taking in from the millages for police and fire, the DDA did not have to apply to those. They can apply it to their own functions. Now those millage captures will now go into the police and fire millages, helping them with a gain.
But there's still a net loss.
Right, yes, there's a net loss from the counties. Correct.
Any other comments?
I don't know how much of a net cost it would be for keeping the operation of that building going down there, because it's rented one time in 6 months. Well, there's a loss, a big loss. So it's not gonna be that much. We're gonna come out ahead on this.
The DDA's existence isn't directly tied and encompassed in that operation of that building, though. That could be cut
No,
and
but it's
sold
always been put on their back.
for the short time that we've had it. The DDA has existed and had a purpose and brought money into the township before that building existed. and weighed it
Exactly.
down, so.
But now it's costing them.
Well, no one's promoting it. From what I'm hearing tonight is that if somebody knows about it and has been in there, likes it, knows it's available, and then they
You might
come to
call
us,
some-
either Jamie or
I
you.
called some Detroit people that seen pictures of it. So people are promoting it on Facebook. It's all over. I got them from Lansing.
Well,
They come up and
without-
look at it
yeah.
and they change their mind.
Yeah, we get inquiries every month on it,
Oh, yeah.
but so far, no
They just
one
walk away.
is renting it.
Okay.
I had a 3-day, 4-day booking that canceled because they couldn't get the people.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll bring up two things. I understand your point about the building sales, the price disparity. However, they are two very different buildings. This is a much more dynamic issue than just the numbers alone. So I just want to make sure you're aware that there's much more within these that makes one more viable than another, depending on the use that's going to be used for. The other thing is donation law. Out of the law research I've done, municipal law, Michigan municipal law, one thing's held up very clear for 150 years in Michigan, and that is donation law. That a municipality is not allowed to make a donation. Even to the point that there have been communities, one in particular, wanted to have the lights on the ball fields lit up for the Little League games. And it was even brought up to a vote of the people, put on the ballot. And overwhelmingly, the people voted to allow these lights to be on for these ball games. But it still got overturned by a judge because it was considered a donation. The consumption of the electricity was considered a donation and therefore not allowed. I don't make laws. I'm just trying to mitigate liability on this.
So was the municipality punished by this, or did they just lose in the court?
Is there a difference?
Yeah.
What's that difference?
Get a fine, go to jail? No, but I mean, if the judge just said you can't do that, okay. But did he say you have a fine of $5,000 or something? There is a major difference. So
is our policy not legal?
How does that difference equate to how we are supposed to uphold the law?
well, that's your interpretation of the law. I mean, you quote laws often, and in your reading and your interpretation. I don't know how correct they are, but it's, you know, I'm not willing to take that at face value, that you know about a law and that's your interpretation of it, so therefore it's.
5 years ago, those examples were brought forward to you in a packet.
I don't recall, but all I'm saying is that if the judge says, some court says, hey, you can't do that, okay. Okay. So my question to you was there some financial penalty? And I'm guessing no. So you move on, you don't do it again.
Is there case law the other way?
There's a lot of case law on donation law.
Jim, I have to say that while I understand the point, I was a little shocked to hear you say it didn't matter whether it was right or wrong unless there was
I didn't
jail
say
or a
that.
penalty.
I didn't say it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
So,
You didn't hear me say those words.
No, I'm paraphrasing, but why don't you just say it now then, Jim? So is it a problem if there isn't a fine or imprisonment? Is it wrong or isn't it?
Well, that would be a test kind of thing.
It's not a test, it's a question to you. Is it or isn't it?
If I'm convinced that it's definitely against the law.
If a court says it's wrong and they don't fine you or put you in jail, is it wrong? In your mind, period, is it wrong?
My opinion would be that.
Is it wrong, Jim? John Picata, stat of it. Is it wrong, Jim?
Okay.
Seriously.
This is,
Yeah,
come on.
that's enough.
Let's end this damn meeting.
All right,
trying to.
need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thanks for coming out.